nation, I am part of this. Whoa, carry the song, carry the sound. The future is here. The future is here. Goodbye yesterday, tomorrow is now for the taking. The future is here. The future is here. Raise your hands in the air if you believe the future has come now. The future is here. The future is here. This is our, this is our, this is our country. The future is here. The future is here. The future has come.
The future is not a time zone that is yet to come. The future is everything that we can be but have not yet become. The future is everything that we can do but have not yet done. The future is here, the future is now. So go ahead and deliver the future, because you can, because you must, and together we will.
We are the future, we are the dream, we are the nation, we are part of this. Yes, we are so amazing, that's the least we shall be. At the heart of the nation, changing history. How can they say that we are finished? We have just begun, when we have nowhere else to run to, we have nowhere else to go. So get out of the way of the land of our dreams. We are the nation, we are part of this. Oh, oh. We are the nation, we are part of this. Whoa, carry the song, carry the sound. The future is here. The future is here. Goodbye yesterday, tomorrow is now for the taking. The future is here. The future is here. I am the future. I am the future. I am the dream. Whoa, I am the nation. I am part of this. Yes, yes, I am so amazing. That's the least I shall be. The least I shall be. At the heart of the nation, changing history. How can they say that we are finished? We have just begun. When we have nowhere else to run, nowhere else to run to, nowhere else to go. Hey, oh, I am the nation. I am part of this. Hey, so get out of the way of the land of my dreams. I am the nation. I am part of this. Whoa, carry the song, carry the sound. The future is here. The future is here. Goodbye yesterday, tomorrow is now for the taking. The future is here. The future is here. Raise your hands in the air if you believe the future has come now. The future is here. The future is here. This is our, this is our, this is our country. The future is here. The future is here. The future has come.
The future is not a time zone that is yet to come. The future is everything that we can be but have not yet become. The future is everything that we can do but have not yet done. The future is here, the future is now. So go ahead and deliver the future, because you can, because you must, and together we will.
We are the future, we are the dream, we are the nation, we are part of this. Yes, we are so amazing, shall be. At the heart of the nation, changing history. How can they say that we are finished? We have just begun. When we have nowhere else to run to, we have nowhere else to go. So get out of the way of the land of our dreams. We are the nation, we are part of this. Oh, oh. We are the nation, we are part of this. Whoa. Carry the song, carry the sound. The future is here. The future is here. Goodbye yesterday, tomorrow is now for the taking. The future is here. The future is here. I am the future. I am the future. I am the dream. Whoa. I am the nation. I am part of this. Yes, I am so amazing. That's the least I shall be. The least I shall be. At the heart of the nation, changing history. How can they say that we are finished? We have just begun. When we have nowhere else to run, nowhere else to run to, nowhere else to go. Hey, I am the land of my dreams. Oh, I am the nation. I am part of this. So get out of the way of the land of my dreams. I am the nation, I am part of this. Whoa, carry the song, carry the sound. The future is here. The future is here. Goodbye yesterday, tomorrow is now for the taking. The future is here. The future is here. Raise your hands in the air if you believe the future has come now. The future is here. The future is here. This is our, this is our, this is our country. The future is here. The future is here. The future has come.
The future.
Good day, everyone. Welcome to CoGSAYR's second anniversary event. It's a great pleasure to have everyone here with us as we celebrate another year of building a community of students and young researchers who are passionate about the potential that genomics has to transform scientific research and discoveries within the African context. So today is not just about marking another year, it's about celebrating the ideas, the collaborations, and the mentors that have shaped the impact that we have made in the past 2 years and the future that we aspire to. So to our mentors and to our speakers, to everyone here, and to the fellows who recently completed the fellowship organized by the organization. We want to thank you all for being a part of this journey. And as we celebrate this event, the second anniversary event of CoGSAYR Africa, we hope that each one of us will be inspired and will take on stronger visions to build the next generation of researchers in African genomics and inspire us to work even harder in that direction. So thank you everyone for being here. We are very grateful to our speakers for being at this event and for all the organizers and leadership of the organization. And we hope that this would be an event that everyone present here would be glad to have attended. And at this point, we would like to show us the documentary that we have created to commemorate all that we have done in the past 2 years, where we are now and where we hope to go in the years to come. Thank you very much.
Why did I join CoGSAYR? At the time, I just completed my medical degree and I knew I was interested in genomics because I had done a few internships here and there, but I wasn't really sure how I could apply genomics to clinical medicine. And so I was searching for a community and association, just like a group of people to learn from. And a few organizations existed at the time, but they all seemed to be for very serious professionals who were already doing work in genomics. And I just felt like I want to fit in there. And around the same time, I saw the call to join CoGSAYR's executive team, and I jumped at the opportunity because it's stated that it was for aspiring scientists. And what that meant to me was I didn't have to have it all figured out. And so I joined.
Like any other emerging researcher, this journey started like a brilliant idea.
When I first of all joined CoGSAYR was still growing, learning, trying to reconstruct itself.
And it was so tough in the beginning because I've got no background in genomics. By the grace of God, this fellowship happened. The Consortium of Genomic Students and Young Researchers in Africa Fellowship happened at the right time.
CoGSAYR is proof that the future of African genomics will be built by Africans for Africa. And it has shown the possibilities of what can happen where young African researchers come together to learn, share knowledge, share ideas, very beautiful ideas that are directed towards solving African health challenges.
Like many young African researchers like myself, I was trying to navigate this journey alone, searching for opportunities, learning resources, and community of people who share the same vision like myself. CoGSAYR changed that for me, and it gave me a community of young African researchers just like myself across Africa who are united by a common goal, which is to bridge the gap between genomics and Africa.
CoGSAYR is the only group I could find clinicians, pharmacists working alongside research scientists. With this, my bench work could easily and directly be translated to the bedside.
Joining this fellowship introduced me to the vibrant community where I could learn from experts and young African researchers. This fellowship gave me a sense of belongingness, and it reminded me that a part of generation of African scientists working together to solve an African problem.
Through this fellowship, I have learned so much with regard to the basics of genomics, technologies, and the tools. And of course, I have learned to understand the language within the field of genomics.
CoGSAYR is a community that believes in young talents and has created a safe space for that talent to grow.
It has been a platform for growth, collaboration, and purpose. I'm grateful to be a part of this community that is helping shape the future of genomic research in Africa.
Blissful ignorance is how I would describe my state of mind when I decided I was going to start CoGSAYR Africa. I did not have a blueprint or the years of experience that tell you how big a thing can become or how hard it will be. What moved me was a simple understanding that precision medicine is the future of healthcare, and this future rests on genomic research. As a medical student, then, I grew tired of hearing about treatment advancements that were not accessible to us as Africans. So I committed to learning about this thing called genomics. Every webinar, every course I took, every research paper that I read echoed the same thing, which is that Africans are underrepresented in global genomic databases.
That one sentence left me with a thought that I couldn't quite shake off. What would happen if you gathered a community of young people equally moved to solve the problem and put in their hands all the resources that they needed? I guess there was only one way to find out. For me, I consider this super important because every strategy, every grand strategy that we come up with to solve this problem fall flat if we do not have trained, dedicated hands to carry the vision forward into the decades to come. We need a critical mass of such people, not just a handful. We set out to achieve this, and it turned out to not be as easy as we thought. If only I knew just a handful of the resources, the time, the energy, and the commitments that would be needed to carry this vision forward, I guess I would never have started it. But I guess that's the beauty of blissful ignorance. In the past 2 years, we have experienced something absolutely phenomenal. We have had hundreds of young, enthusiastic people walk through our doors as members, as people who joined our virtual events, as people who attended our conference, and even as people who participated in our inaugural fellowship program. For me, I think the craziest part has been when we put a call out for applications for the fellowship, and we received almost 2,000 applications in just 7 days. And this was something that we had planned for just 50 people. Nothing could have prepared us for that. For me, these aren't just numbers. They are a signal of something important. And it falls on us to think carefully about how to turn that signal into something meaningful. Because even if we have not succeeded at anything else, we have proven one thing. What we lack is not interest. It is structured pathways of converting this raw curiosity into real scientific capacity. Our job is to build those structures, to replace tokenistic engagement with genuine opportunities for Africans to contribute meaningfully to genomic research. Another thing we are learning is to see the genomics ecosystem as a whole. The people who run the labs, who analyze the data, are not the entire story. They are an important part, but not all of it. The translational research we are reaching for also rests on strong biobanks, on efficient operational systems, on innovators who can translate the information that we are generating into useful diagnostics and tools for the future. We need technically sound people across the entire spectrum, and we must guide young people into those areas as well. That, to me, is the future of what we are building. But we are taking it a step at a time. 2 years on, with so many reached through our collaborative efforts, I honestly think that the vision is just becoming clear to us. Our young people are an untapped resource, and we are committed to staying the course. As they always say, it is only just day one. Thank you very much for displaying the documentary, and I hope that that has given into what the organization is about, what we have done, and what we hope to accomplish. And so at this point, I would like to introduce the Executive Director of CoGSAYR in the person of Dr. Gladys Ibrahim for her address.
All right, thank you so much, Anna Vami. Can you confirm that you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much, Anna Vami, and good morning from Nigeria, from wherever you're joining us in the world. Before I go on, I just want to take a quick pulse check. So can you please type your name in the chat box and tell us what country you're joining from? How you can also add how you found out about us, and one thing that has stood out to you about our organization since you found us. I'm just going to give a minute for, okay, we have Dika and Nisalema joining us from Malawi. Hi, from Nigeria. Oh, Dr. Adeyemi, we have Dr. Adeyemi joining us from the USA. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. Mubarak from Nigeria, thank you, thank you. Emmanuel from Nigeria, Mfoma from Nigeria. Oh, we have a lot of people from Nigeria. Okay, thank you. Oh yeah, I can see somebody from Kenya. Yeah. Hi, Dr. Vicky, joining us from Cape Town. Good morning. Yeah, so okay, you can keep it coming and I'll just continue. So I did that just to kind of show the cross-country network that we have built over the last 2 years, that we're excited to have built over the last 2 years. And I think my goal or mission here is just to give a bit of a background. Hi, Dr. Gada from Egypt. We're so excited to have you join us this morning. So yes, so I'm just going to give a brief background of the organization, the story as to what really birthed this organization, why we started it in the first place, and what has happened in the last 2 years, and just also highlight a few of our collaborators, a few people that we want to really appreciate who have contributed to our success in the last 2 years. So just a little background. So my name is Gladys, and I'm the executive director and founder, and I'm a medical doctor as well. And for me, while I was in medical school, we were always taught about different diagnostics and specific types of drugs that were not accessible to us here in Nigeria. And for me, it did not make sense that we would continue doing medicine the way it was done years and decades ago, and we'll just continue doing the same thing, rinse and repeat. So I was really looking for something else that I would do on a personal note that would impact or influence the field of healthcare and field of medicine in particular, on a larger scale, and essentially make our medications, make our diagnostics and therapeutics more effective. And somewhere along the way, I learned about genomics, particularly in the middle of COVID, when there were a lot of conversations around how genomics really helped in pathogen surveillance. And learning more and more about it, I was beginning to see how it's played a major role in what we now understand to be precision medicine. And I was just learning a lot, and it seemed like an exciting thing to know about. But I think one major thing that really stood out in almost everything that you will read about genomics, especially genomics in Africa, was that we were very underrepresented. And for me, as a young person, I was going to say as a young person then, but I'm still young. So as a young person, for me, it felt like we were being left behind. We're not really taught or told about this thing, or given the capacity to actually learn about genomics and also contribute to genomics, so we could contribute to closing this gap that everybody keeps talking about. And for me, that was one major thing. So of course, I was learning alone. I was taking all the courses. I was doing all the learnings on my own, but I wasn't really seeing anything that really resonated with me in terms of opportunities. There were always opportunities I would really love to apply for or participate in, and I wouldn't qualify for them because they would ask for a number of things. So you should have a PhD, you should have this, and you should have that. So for me, that was really the motivation and the passion. So, okay, I was like, how about we start a community where fellow people, other people like myself, would also get to find a sense of community, get to find meaning and a clear sense of direction as to, okay, what is genomics about? How do I learn about it? What direction should I take? So that was the passion. And when I started, it was very interesting to see that there were a lot of people like me. I really thought I was apparently not that special, which is, I mean, what has birthed this community. Even starting from the executive team, the founding members, and then people who joined us along the way. One thing that really stood out was that there were a lot of people that were experiencing the same thing that I experienced, which is that lack of community, that lack of a sense of direction. So I think it was very interesting to see, and also exciting to also connect with people like me who were also in a similar path, some who had gone ahead of me already, but not maybe far ahead, some who were also coming behind. And it was just interesting to be the person, and it's also been an honor to be the person who is the would I say brain behind starting it out, and of course all of the other amazing people that joined along the way to help build, because this has been the best set of people that I have had to work with on anything in my life. So yeah, so what we've done, of course, we started out very little. We started out in the first year, and what we're essentially doing was what I would probably describe as journal club. So of course we knew we're dealing with beginners and wanted them to be familiar with genomics, the terms, the language and all of that, and what types of research are refer to or consider genomics research and how to apply it, because application is the most important thing. So we're doing a lot of journal clubs and then just putting ourselves out there. And somewhere along the way, we got to do a conference, which was really great, was a good way of putting ourselves out there even more and establishing ourselves as that community of young people that are interested and engaging in genomics research. And that was particularly, that was a success in my own opinion, and by my definition, it was a success. We had a lot of people join the community as a result of that conference. We had the opportunity to actually bring experts, genomics experts, into the same room, both physically and virtually, and they were able to pass over that knowledge, just essentially share from their wealth of experience, which is really one thing we're trying to do, to bridge that gap between we, the young people who are trying to take on the good work that is being done, and the experts that have already done a lot. So it was a great opportunity for that gap to be bridged. We had young people in the room filled with excitement, were able to ask questions at their own level of understanding, not feel lost in the crowd. I think that was super, that was a good time. And then, of course, following that, we had our fellowship, which actually just concluded last week, where we did a foundational genomics curriculum. We took our fellows through all of these topics, applications of genomics in various contexts. And it was also very interesting to see the amazing projects that came out of that, because we had a capstone project to wrap that up. And it was very interesting to see how just about 8 weeks of learning, what could come out of that. We had people talk about preferred solutions, models, frameworks across different things like how to improve the application of polygenic risk scores to application of genetic engineering. We had a lot of amazing things. So it was really exciting to see what could come out of something something we considered very simple or very basic. And of course, now we are going into our full-blown membership model, where we'll have like a mentor-guided membership structure. And essentially, all of these things that we're doing really is just to create ways that we could get the people that are already in the field to pass on the knowledge that they have to the next generation, and to also create a critical mass of young genomics scientists and enthusiasts who can then apply it in their various contexts. So yeah, and before I go, I think I'm very excited. I mean, we've done all of this in 2 years. I'm particularly excited to see what's going to happen in the next few years, because if we're able to do this in just 2 years with what I would consider really limited resources, I can only imagine what would happen in the next few years and even in the next decade. So I'm very excited for all that we've done, and even more excited for what is to come. Before I leave, I just want to give a special appreciation and shout out to the team, the people, this founding team, founding members, those who joined along the way. You have all been absolutely phenomenal. I just want to thank you for doing all that. So our faculty advisors, I'm not sure if Professor Fatima has joined us because he's a speaker, and we've had really, really supportive faculty advisors, Professor Fatima, Professor Mulder, Professor Folari, and Dr. Matimba. I just want to say thank you for being a pillar of support to us, to our sponsors and collaborators. We've had different collaborators, different people sponsor certain aspects of our work. I think I saw Mr. Lukman join earlier. So that's Inkaba. Thank you so much for supporting us. We've had ABIB, a strong support to us. Thank you. And to everybody and thank you to the collaborators that are also going to collaborate with us in future. And to our community members, I mean, you are why we are here. So thank you so much to everybody who has joined us as members, as fellows, and those who just engage with us virtually. Thank you so much. And my final charge to everybody here, especially to the young people who make up our community, I just want to say that the future of genomics research in Africa is in our hands. And we must commit these hands to learning so they are capable of collecting the baton, because we cannot just say it by mouth. We can't just say, oh, we are the future of genomics research or the future of genomics research is in our hands. We must ensure that our hands are trained. We must ensure that we do all that it takes, despite the odds, to be found worthy in learning and in character, and to actually change the field of healthcare using genomics, which is very promising in Africa. And of course, we must first believe in ourselves, which is one thing that we try to do here. We believe strongly in ourselves that we have the capacity to actually take on the work, to actually be engaged, not just on a surface level, but we are engaged on a deeper level to actually contribute to research. So we must first believe in ourselves first before anyone else can believe in us, really. So I just want to, all of us to know that. And we have so much on our time. We are young. We have the energy, which is what we've seen in our community. Lots of people really excited and energetic. We have the energy. We have the time. I mean, a lot of us are young and we have a lot of time on our hands. So it's important for us to actually commit to doing what we need to do to ensure that we have all the capacity that is needed to actually take on this work. And I can only imagine there's only so much that can come out of it. And again, and also to emphasize that we should put on a spirit of collaboration, because it's not something that anybody can do on their own. So that's why I'm really happy when I see our community. We have doctors, we have laboratory scientists, we have physiologists, we have people across the entire healthcare spectrum. So I think that's something that's very good to see, because if we're learning together as young people, then there is the potential for us to also collaborate on a bigger scale or in a bigger scale in the future. So I just want us to know that there's so much that can come out of all of this, of our opportunities, of our efforts, and of our collaboration. And so, yeah, congratulations to all of us, and cheers to so much more that we will be. Thank you so much. Over to you, Anavami.
Thank you much, Doctor. Thank you very much, Dr. Ibrahim. It was actually really inspiring listening to you and having you tell us where CoGSAYR started from your mind, and how everything has culminated into what we have here and now, and where we are looking forward to in the not so far future to come. Thank you very much. So at this point, we are supposed to have the keynote speech from Professor Fatuma, who's also one of our mentors and faculty advisors at CoGSAYR. However, there's been a little logistic problem with scheduling, so we will be reading out his bio at this point for us to get a glimpse about who he is and the work that he's doing. Okay, so Professor Segun Fatuma is a genomic epidemiologist whose pioneering work has advanced understanding of non-communicable diseases and championed equitable genomics research globally. He leads major Africa-focused genomic initiatives, including KidneyGen Africa, the Uganda Genome Resource, and the Nigerian 100K Genome Project, while holding key roles at Queen Mary University of London and the MRC UVRI Uganda unit. With funding from major international, Professor Fatuma has driven research capacity build he has driven research capacity building across Africa and contributed to global genomics policy and serves on influential advisory boards. And he is widely recognized in international media, including BBC, The Telegraph, Wired, Science Magazine, Forbes, and others, and has been honored with multiple awards. And Professor Fatuma is a prominent advocate for diversity and inclusion in genomic research. So this is who our first keynote speaker is, and he is supposed to be taking us on the topic, the journey of Africa in genomics and how far we've come. And I think that we can say that he is in the perfect position to take us on this topic. However, since he's running on a tight schedule and cannot join us at exactly this time, we would be taking the second keynote speech from our second keynote speaker now. And she's here with us, Professor Zane Lombard, and we'll be reading her bio. So, Professor Zane Lombard obtained her PhD from the University of Witwatersrand, specializing in human genetics and bioinformatics. She's currently a research professor at the Sydney Brenner Institute for Molecular Bioscience, where she holds a Roche Research Chair for Precision Medicine and Genomics in Africa. Professor Lombard leads a research group investigating the genetic causes of rare pediatric developmental disorders and is the principal investigator of an NIH-funded project titled Deciphering Developmental Disorders in Africa, DDD Africa. The project aims to advance rare disease discovery and capacity development in Africa, alongside investigating the ethical and social dimensions of research involving vulnerable groups. Professor Lombard is passionate about genomics and health research in Africa, and she is a long-standing member of the Southern African Society for Human Genetics and currently serves as chair of the Steering Committee of the Human Heredity and Health in Africa H3 Africa Consortium, a major Pan-African initiative involving multiple countries and institutions. And she is in the very perfect position to take us on the topic who leads from here in terms of the African genome and African genomic discovery. So, Professor Zane Lombard, at this point, we would like to take your keynote speech as it has been moved ahead, and we hope you can speak, and it's great to have you here.
Thank you so much. Let me just share my slides. Let's see. There we go. Just checking that everybody can see my slides and hear me clearly.
Yes, you can be heard very clearly and we can see the slides.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you to Dr. Ibrahim and Yuan for inviting me to speak today. It's really impressive to hear all the work that you've done in just 2 short years. It's very inspiring. So I'm happy to be here and to share some of my experience and in working in genomics in Africa with you. So the title is Who Leads From Here? And I thought I would just talk a little bit about the promise of precision medicine and thinking about how we take this forward and into reality on the African continent and who should be leading that and how are we going to do this from a practical perspective. So I think there was a fantastic introduction talking about the promise of precision medicine and really knowing that genomics really underscores this all the way through from precision diagnostics, where we could look at individual diagnostics and best clinical utility to personalized treatment and personalized drug design, but also hopefully one day also taking this through to disease prevention, where we can use profiles of genetic risk for intervention, but also for disease prevention ultimately. And really, genomics plays a role in each and every one of these sectors and can really make a difference in the way that we approach medicine in the future. And I think there's already so many great examples and great strides that have been made in trying to close this gap that was spoken about earlier around genomics in Africa. And I think one prime example of that is through the work that the H3 Africa Consortium has done. This is a Pan-African consortium. I'm sure many of you have heard of this before and have worked with these groups involving many different countries around South, East, North, and West Africa. And during the 10 years of the CoGSAYR Africa Consortium actively being funded and working in research, more than 100,000 participants were enrolled for genomics research, with more than 50,000 of those participants being genotyped. So, and that data resource is something that is now available for future research. And I think the most important concept of that is that the research agenda for these projects under the CoGSAYR Africa banner was really driven. The research agenda was really driven by African scientists and African researchers, which is so important. So there were lots of discoveries that has come from this. One of them, just again showing how important it is for us to invest in genomics in Africa, by the discoveries of novel genomic variants, by just looking at small parts of this bigger cohort. We discovered more than 3 million novel variants. I'm so sorry, I seem to have lost connection, so I'm just going to share my screen again and continue. Apologies for that. So yes, so as I was saying, this legacy of CoGSAYR Africa continues to enrich the genomics landscape in Africa, and it's been carried forward by new initiatives like PAGRA and Agenda. And across the continent now, we're seeing new national genome projects popping up, really opening up new opportunities for young researchers to participate and contribute to genomics research in Africa. And this is really important because we do have to consider who is going to benefit from precision medicine. I think one of the things to clearly understand is that the globe is changing. There is big changes as far as where the largest amount of individuals live and are being born. And those are really the people who need to benefit from precision medicine. So as we can see, Africa is really up there with almost 36% of the global births in 2026. And these young individuals are the ones that we want to benefit from precision medicine. And genomics is really now at an inflection point for large-scale adoption into healthcare. But as we've heard, data remains overwhelmingly drawn from populations of European ancestry, and this really does need to change. And it has to change so that we ensure that the benefits of genomic medicine is not being bypassed and not being accessible to populations who need this most. And this remains a very current and topical issue. This article was published just recently in July in the New York Times, really talking about how this gap still remains and how it exacerbates the healthcare disparities that we have at the moment and will have in the future if this is not being addressed. So we know that there is this diversity gap, and this is very nicely illustrated, and I'm sure Prof. Fatuma will speak more about this in one of his papers, that we know that overwhelmingly more than 90% of data available is from individuals of European descent. And although that gap is shrinking as far as non-European data, the African contribution to that data set still remains shockingly low and really needs to be closed. So even though Africa makes up a third of the world's population, less than 3% of the global genomics data is from Africa. And we all want to work on this together to close that gap. So one thing that I am really passionate about and want to spend a few minutes talking about now is that Of course, that research is really important and genomics research is really important, but we need to also start shifting our focus to translation and really providing the evidence that of the benefits of what genomics can bring to the table as far as health and welfare in Africa. And there's a few barriers that we need to consider and work on that is really hampering this translation. I think the first thing is to think about data sovereignty. And again, great strides has been made, and I think we need to keep investing in this, in making sure that genomic data is being generated on the African continent so that we avoid the situation where data that is generated offshore becomes subject to foreign jurisdiction. And also it erodes local capacity, not only for generating data, but also for data analysis, which speaks directly to the workforce and infrastructure gap. We have seen lots of progress being made as far as sequencing capacity, especially in the last couple of years, as next generation sequencing is being used more and more for pathogen surveillance. But the bioinformatics capacity to deal with this data is lagging a little bit behind. And that's why it's so encouraging to see the kind of investments that is happening, for instance, in the African Bioinformatics Institute, to make sure that that gap is being closed. Beyond the data space, we also need further scaling of medical and science workforce training to ensure that whatever translates from genomics research can reach the patients that needs it most. I think we also need to think about innovation and intellectual properties and how these things get translated in the local capacity. And I think the 54 gene lesson is a really important one for us to learn from. For those who are not aware, 54 Gene is a company that was started in Nigeria, very successfully raised funds to invest in a biobank in Nigeria. Trained workforce was built, but unfortunately then closed up shop a couple of years ago. And really, I think what we are learning from this is that there are unique barriers and obstacles that us African researchers need to consider as far as going beyond our ambitions and building on that to make sure that we have a durable, sustainable model that can go far and last long term. And then finally, thinking about regulatory considerations. And again, I think great strides are being made here, but we need to be aware that there's lots of regulatory issues. Africa isn't a single country. There are multiple countries, each with their own authorities, regulations, and laws. And we need to work together to harmonize and to create sustainable ways for people across the continent to work together and network. And lots of great strides are being made in this through the African CDC Genomics Advisory Board that has been opened up. There's some African Union-led initiatives like the African Medicine Agency that is opening up new avenues to do that. And CoGSAYR Africa continues to work in this space as they try to bring together and harmonize efforts around national genome projects across the continent. So I want to shift a little bit and tell you a little bit of the work that my team and I have been doing in this kind of translational space to really try and illustrate how genomics can be implemented and used specifically for us in the rare disease space to ensure better outcomes and precision diagnostic implementation for people living with rare diseases. So we started the Deciphering Developmental Disorders in Africa project a couple of years ago, specifically through funding from CoGSAYR Africa. And this initial study focused on cohorts both in the Republic of Congo as well as South Africa to build a cohort of 500 rare disease patients as well as their parents to illustrate the benefits of using genomic sequencing and specifically exome sequencing in the diagnosis, but also in the clinical utility for rare disease patients. I think what was unique about this project is that it went beyond just sequencing and bioinformatics analysis of that data to inform diagnostic yield, but we also specifically focused on community engagement and training, making sure that we're building a cohort of future leaders who could take this work forward. And through this, we've learned some really valuable lessons. I think one of it is that we have to do some cross-cutting capacity development, and it's not just about the capacity of doing sequencing and data analysis, but it's about investing in people and building expertise across disciplines, from clinicians to laboratory scientists and bioinformaticians, all the way through to genetic counselors, and making sure that that variant interpretation expertise and expertise in genomics remains on the continent. We also want to be sure that we invest in processes that can be translated into healthcare. And the only way to do that really is through building sustainable partnerships, both within Africa as well as internationally with our collaborators who help us share the knowledge, really in order for us to move beyond a space where we feel we are hampered because things aren't perfect, but to a space where we can actually move forward and implement clinical and precision medicine pipelines. Another important lesson linked to that we've learned is when we look at this pipeline, there often are pieces missing, and that really shouldn't deter us from going ahead and moving forward with our plans, and to rather view this pipeline to see where it's absolutely essential for us to have a local core in Africa set up to proceed, where we would need additional strengthening, and where remote support can really be a patchwork on that pipeline to make sure things keep moving forward. And this is really the pipeline that we've set up for DDD Africa, for our genomic medicine, all the way through from identifying appropriate candidates for exome testing and doing clinical phenotyping, with strong local core facilities being built in the countries involved. And moving all the way through to sequencing and bioinformatics analysis. And what we've learned along the way is that we can really get this pipeline moving and going in a very efficient way by making sure that we involve remote support, and while we're working on strengthening other parts of the pipeline that is maybe not as where it needs to be at the moment. So through DDD Africa, this is just some of the results. Already, just from our exome sequencing data analysis process that we've gone through, we've been able, for our cohort of 500 participants, reach a diagnostic yield of almost 45%, which really is a tremendous personal utility for families that are involved, but also obviously opens doors to clinical utility as well, as this would give additional answers around treatment and diagnostic and prognostic pathways going forward. I think one of the other things that is underscored for us is how much novel information and knowledge we're gaining from doing this research in Africa and involving African cohorts. On average, we're seeing over 1,000 novel variants per exome that we analyze, and many of the disease-associated variants that we observe are actually novel, and 45% of those are de novo variants, again, giving important clinical information for the participants involved. This slide is just also bringing it back to how genomic medicine and genomic research can really have individual impact. And what I'd like to just highlight here is maybe one of our patients from the cohort and the outcomes for this particular patient. So this patient was originally referred to a genetics clinic in Johannesburg at the age of 6 months for assessment based on having a cardiac defect and associated dysmorphic features, and has really spent many, many years in the system, going from specialist to doctor to specialist, without any real answers being found. And she was enrolled in DDD Africa at 10 years of age, and we were able to identify through exome sequencing a specific variant in the CDC42 gene, which was classified as likely pathogenic based on certain criteria. And this information what else we were able to confirm is that this was a de novo variant, which has important impact on family planning for her parents, but also has been able to give us clues and information about how to specifically cater for her specific heart defect, and that has really had some great clinical benefits for this particular patient, as well as ending this long diagnostic odyssey. So how do we lead from here? How do we use this information that we're gathering on the continent, but also making sure that we are amplifying efforts and that we are making sure that we see a space of global equity as far as precision medicine and genomic medicine is concerned? And I think there's really three important aspects that we need to think about, and especially for this group of young researchers here, as you think about your future careers and things to focus on. And I think the first is that we really all need to be champions for exponential investment in Africa. And this has to be across the board in investing in building cohorts with strong clinical information, with genomic samples being biobanked, and also then for data that being generated, for being kept in African-led databases, infrastructure investment, as well as in the workforce. And that's really why it's so heartening and so optimistic to see the efforts and the passion that this group exudes. The second is to be champions and to speak loudly about genomics needing to be based on a fair trade model. And what this means is that we need to think about the partnerships that we engage in and ensuring that there's equitable benefit sharing. And this benefit sharing will be for participants of research, but also for the scientists who are involved in research, making sure there's fair attributions for efforts that are going into building cohorts, sample collection, data generation, as well as paper writing, and making sure that there are equal opportunity for African researchers as well as their partners to engage in these efforts. And then, of course, ethical data governance above all is really important, and making sure that it's not only Western-focused ethical aspects that are being thought about, but also making sure that we're engaging with local and cultural sensitive ethical issues as well as we do genomic research. And then finally, to really think about translation and implementation focused. One of the barriers that we definitely can address by ensuring that this becomes an aspect of our research is to change political will by providing the evidence of the benefits of genomics to healthcare and to medicine, is really one way that we can start getting more investment as well as support from government to make sure that our genomics research influence has a positive influence in Africa. And I leave you with this message. I really do believe that Africa can shape the global genomics space across the continent, across the world, really as a bold leader and have some significant impacts. The tenacity and innovation that the researchers have on the continent is just amazing. And the leaders who are going to drive this is in the room with us today. It's the young research and the students that take the initiative to create consortia like the one that we're celebrating today, and is really the group that is going to take this forward and make sure that genomics benefits everybody across the globe. So I leave you with this message. Thank you so much for the invitation, and enjoy the rest of today's proceedings. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Lombard. Your message was well received, and thank you for all the work that you're doing in this space, especially through DDD. We are glad to see how far your team has come and the advances that you're making. Some of our participants may have questions, however, they will be taken after the second keynote speech by Professor Fatimore. Professor Fatimore is on the call with us at this time. We will be taking his keynote speech. which has been titled The Journey of Africa in Genomics and How Far We've Come. Thank you very much for joining us. Your bio has been read previously before the first keynote speaker. So we're glad to have you here, sir.
Can you see my slide and can you hear me clearly?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me to present today. So you've asked me to talk about the journey of Africa in genomics, how far we've gone. So like I've been introduced, my name is Segun Fatumo. I'm Professor and Chair of Genomic Diversity at Primary University of London. I'm also the head of NCD Genomics at the Medical Research Council in Uganda. So I'm going to be talking briefly about what I think what genomics was in Africa in the past. And I'll talk about my own perspective about what the field has built currently. And I will give you a bit of what I think is the gap between discovery and medicine. And I'll end with what I think the future should look like. So in the past, African genomics was characterized by ethical dumping, helicopter science, and exploitation. This was one of my quotations previously. So here you see what I mean by ethical, what I mean by helicopter science or parachute science, or what other people call safari science, is kind of science where people from high-income country, for example, people from the UK or the US, so they fly to Africa, so they go somewhere like a country that is in a low-middle-income country like Ghana or Burkina Faso, they collect samples, they fly back to their country, and they do nice science, they publish their work in Nature or in Science without little or no consideration to scientists and also participants from where those samples were collected. So this was what genomics in Africa looked like in the past. It is called safari science or helicopter science, or if you like, you call it parachute science. So here, I give an example from some paper that shows that many of the affected researchers agree that a key missing factor is national government commitment. Governments in Africa are not really paying so much attention to genomics. That contributed a lot to what is called helicopter science. But things have changed a little bit. Of course, we see a country like South Africa and Great Talk, Zeni, talking about what they've done previously. But there's still many governments across Africa that have no understanding or no commitment to African genomics. So I will try to explain briefly. I'm not sure whether everybody understands what ethical dumping is. So ethical dumping is the practice of moving research which will not be allowed in high-income country or even like a middle-income middle-income country or low-middle-income country. I'll give an example of what that can be. If you are doing research, there's an ethical process to follow. You cannot just go into the streets and collect people's sample without appropriate consent. There are many things you cannot do, and there's a way you can do some stuff. But in the past, in terms of genomics in Africa, so there were a lot of ethical dumping. So where ethical approval from host institution is sought after research has been completed. And I have an example I put in the link here for people that might be interested to have a look at it. Even as recent as during some Ebola cases a few years ago in many countries in Africa, you see scientists in high-income country go to low-income country, just do research, and when they're about to publish a paper, so they remember that they've not have the required ethical approval. So this is called ethical dumping, because they will not have done that in their own country. So an example also is when research participants are being refused compensation for harm incurred during a study. Also, an example of commercialization of genetic sample without benefit sharing. This is a very key point, and I came just late to hear the later part of Zeni's talk, and I had talking about benefit sharing. So this is really the stage where we have genomic study has to be done correctly, has to be done rightly, and benefit sharing is just appropriate things to do. So there's a story. There's a group of people in South Africa called the Sam people. The Sam people, they are known to be the first people. They have like also people describe as the oldest DNA of any human. Because of that, there are many people, many scientists that are interested in their genetics. So people go there. They have been studied and studied and studied and studied and studied again. But because of all these issues I've mentioned, ethical dumping, exploitation, electrical science. So some people now they put things in place for themselves. They have policy in place, they have regulation in place on how they should be studied. So you cannot just come from somewhere and tell them how they should be studied. So they have everything in place. So the SAN have been one of the most commonly researched people in the world. But many things have been happening. And I put a link here where they've been abused. You just take the sample, you just publish, and you also describe them the way you want to describe them without being sensitive to their culture and all that. So if you want to learn a bit about these some people and what they did, I'll put a link here in the video where you can have a look at that. So after years of research into their people, so the leaders of the South Africa within the San people community, they sat together and they put together this regulation. They say that we have encountered the lack of respect from scientists in many instances in genomics, and they wanted to avoid that. So any study that will be done with sample from the San people has to be done in a particular way. So they put together their own local legislation. I think this is just appropriate, really. And scientists also follow the right code of conduct. So in brief, genomics in the past, was characterized by helicopter science, ethical dumping, and exploitation. So the missing factor is, there's not much commitment from the African government to fund research, and people say that it will pays the piper, dictate the tune. So if he get all the funding from the NIH, from the Wellcome Trust, or from government from other country, they would dictate what happened to you, and that's actually what's happening. So lack of commitment from the African government. There was also a lack of research capacity building. There was also a lack of commitment to mutually benefiting collaboration, where people just fly and do their science and they're not really thinking about proper partnership and proper collaboration. Okay, so I'll move on to before I move on to what I think is the current stage of research. I show an example here about what has changed between the helicopter science practice and African-led science. The key component of what has changed is now we have training and education, capacity building, infrastructure building. We have next generation genomic leadership empowerment. People are really being empowered, and we have regional collaboration, partnership within the continent, and there's also some funding that have come to Africa to do this study. So there have been a lot of changes, and these are the key components for these changes. Okay, so the part 2 of my talk is going to be what the field has been built over the years. And I'm going to talk about this slide and show you what has happened over the years. But I cannot talk about everything that's happened in the last about 20 years. I'm going to just highlight some work from the East Africa, the Nigerian 100,000 genome project, which I was involved, the Uganda genome project, which I'm fully involved in, and also the Gen Africa project. Just to give an example. But from this slide here, from one paper that I led, we show how there's now growing of genomics data all across Africa. You can see from all over the place in the map of Africa. But we should also be careful that the coverage is growing mostly in the East and in West Africa. So you see that the Central Africa, also if you look at the Northern Africa, they still remain severely underrepresented. This is also important. We should remember that Africa is really diverse. People of different ethnicity, about more than 30,000 different ethnicity, speaking about 2,000 languages. These are really very important for the diversity, and we should try to cover all across Africa. And yes, the legacy work from the H3 Africa. I'm not going to talk much about this because I believe Zene will have talked about this one. But what I will just mention here is, if you look at the data coming from Uganda, you see we have a lot of diversity. This data here. I'm going to put it in red. So data from here, the one called UBS, and the one here called UNS. They are from the same country, from Uganda. We can see how distant they are from each other, and it's a lot of diversity coming up from data from Africa. So within the H3 Africa, apart from the science, there are a lot that happened within the H3 Africa. Amazing findings. More than 700 publications within those 10, 12 years. Many people were trained. MSc, PhD, postdoc, and I'm very happy to always say that I was one of the first people that were trained as postdoc in 2012. As a postdoc from the H3 Africa. And there are also many people like me that were trained from the H3 Africa at the beginning. Some amazing results from the H3 Africa, so which is really very important apart from the science. So I'm also going to give an example of the NCD Genomics. So this is a consortium that we developed a few years ago with a biotech company that was called 54Gene. So 54Gene is no more, but we did amazing work within a few years, about 2-3 years. We collected sample all across the 6 geopolitical zone in Nigeria. We collected sample in about 100,000 people. So those samples are still available today. And we also did whole genome sequencing in some of them before the company called 54Gene had a problem with funding and their people that are their investors. But it's amazing project that happened, and the partnership was really a great partnership. So this is the project. We had 2 main projects we're working on. So one of them is called the 54Gene Heritage Study, and the second one is called Nigerian Metabolic Genomics Study, which I led. So you see here, just showing where we went to collect the sample, 13 different states, 21 sites, and have different co-investigators, and plus many people that did amazing work just around COVID time. So at the beginning, during the stage of the excitement in 2022, so we published what we envisaged to be the vision for the Nigerian 100K genome project. If you are interested in reading that, so you can have a look at this paper in Nature Medicine and Nature Genetics. So just to highlight, we did the whole genome sequencing, about 500 sample. You can see here we have specifically 449 Nigerian individuals across 47 self-reported ethnic group. And what you see is that we identify over 36 million SNPs and indel, which are novel and not been found before in like the 1000 genome project. Very amazing. We also find some variants that were classified as pathogenic variants. So if you're interested in what we found from the Nigerian Genome Project, you can have a look at this paper that we published in Cell Genomics. So the Uganda one is the one that I'm most excited about because I'm the PI for this project. In 2019, we published this paper in Cell. At that time, so that you know how much of genomics that was done in Africa before 2019. So this study was considered to be the largest ever genomic study of Africa in 2019. And we had only about 14,000 people. 5,000 we did a genotyping, 2,000 whole genome sequencing, and we had a sample from colleagues in South Africa and also from a course called Adam, which are sample from Nigeria, Kenya, and Ghana. So having a study of 14,000, largest ever in Africa in 2019, was really, now it kind of look a bit ridiculous. But it was great that we were able to start with a study like this, coming mainly from Uganda. So in that study, I told you that we have 2,000 people that we did a whole genome sequencing. Low coverage, but we identified about 9.5 million novel variants that were not present in the 1000 Genome Project Phase 3 at that time, the African Genome Variation Project, and also the UK 10K project. So 5 million novel variants for a sample of 2,000 is just really amazing, just really a lot of novel variants. And again, this emphasizes the diversity that you see just within a particular ethnic group or a particular nation within Africa. So we ran a genome study GWAS in different cardiometabolic traits. We listed them here. So we also identify some novel loci that are associated with some cardiometabolic traits. We also find some distant association at already known loci. What is important to mention is if you look at the last two columns here, which is the minor allelic frequency for African compared to European, you will see that most of these variants that we'll find here to have the distant association at known loci, they are mostly monomorphic, meaning that these variants are kind of absent in the European ancestry. So which means that even if you run the largest ever GWAS in the European ancestry, you will never find this association because the variants are not in the European ancestry, but they are there in the African ancestry. So we also assess, tapicity estimate. If you compare height, we do compare the narrow source adapted estimate of height between Uganda and European population. So we saw that height is less genetically determined in Uganda compared to European population. And on contrary to that, we found that the LDL was significantly higher in Uganda compared to European ancestry. So since then, we run a GWAS of kidney function. Kidney has been, chronic kidney disease has now become endemic in Africa. Many people in the room, you probably know somebody that is on kidney dialysis or looking for kidney transplant. We need to find some kind of solution to that. One of such solutions would be looking at the genetic implication. So in the first GWAS of kidney function in Africa, so we had only about 3,000 people. We ran GWAS, we found two associations. One of them at a locus called GATM and one at the locus called HBB. If you're familiar with HBB is a locus that is known for sickle cell disease. Now, this is also very interesting finding, very small sample and less power. And since then, we've been working, we created a partnership called Kidney Gen Africa. And so the idea of Kidney Africa is to pull data together from all across Africa. And this was the first study from Kidney Gen Africa where we have, instead of just doing GWAS, 30,000 people. So now we can do in more people across Africa. So we have data all across different parts of Africa. So we ran a GWAS looking at different stages. First stage, look at the different region in Africa. Second stage, look at the Africa as a whole. At the last stage, look at African plus African in diaspora. Very interesting study. But what I want to emphasize on that study is that if you look at the genetic association with kidney function in Eastern Africa, what you found to be associated is different from what you found in Western Africa and different from what you found in Southern Africa. Very interesting things to find. They show distinct. It might mean that there's a distinct genetic factor that influence kidney function in continental Africa because we found no overlap association across the three regions of Africa. And here it's just to show when we run the GWAS of Pan-Africa. From Pan-Africa mean African in Africa and Africa in abroad. Also with this is continental Africa. You see some signal that coming up very strongly again and again in whether it's Africa in Africa or Africa in Pan-Africa is this GATM signal that I mentioned before. And of course, we also find up some other signal from the Pan-African GWAS. So I would like to emphasize the role of APOE1 gene. If you know a bit about genetics of kidney, you probably know about APOE1 gene. But most of the things that we know about APOE1 gene, they are things that we learn from African Americans, not from the African in Africa. So the APOE1 G1, G2 genetic variation that we know to be strongly associated and increase the risk of developing chronic kidney disease. With approximately about 13% of African American population carry this variant. So we check this in our continental African population. So first of all, we observe that the overall frequency of APOE1 in continental African population is not 13%, as it was reported in African American. in African population, we found it was only about 5%, which is much more significantly lower than what you see in the African American. We also saw that the association was much more limited in African population, which is very different, really. So we also saw that there's a regional variation. If you look at Southern African population, you find the frequency of APOE1 to be about 8%. If you go to Eastern Africa, it's about 1%. So it's not all the same across continental Africa, which is a very important story to tell. So if you are interested in that, so this paper was published just earlier this year in Nature Communication. So we also been working on trying to look at the genetic risk score. Here is trying to develop PRS using different data sets from the multi-ancestry data of about 1.4 million people, develop PRS from African ancestry and from European ancestry. So I should mention that before we started this study, everything that we know about PRS and its transferability are mostly from multi-ancestry meta-analysis. So what we had in literature was that, when you develop PRS in multi-ancestry, it's transferring to everywhere or any data set. But here we try to test that. Just note that the PRS developed from African ancestry was only about 56,000 people compared to 1.4 million and 1.1 million. So what we found is that the PRS from those African ancestry individual was doing much more better. So because we are achieving R square of 1.1% compared to 0.69 from the multi-ancestry. It's very different from what was known. We also show the PRS stratification. If you put people into different decile, from decile 1 to the decile 10, we saw that the participant on the 10th decile here of the African American derived PRS, they had more than threefold risk of developing type 2 diabetes compared to those people on the first decile. We also saw that on the average, these people here on the 10th decile, they were diagnosed for type 2 diabetes about 2.6 years ahead of people on the first decile. Very interesting stuff that we can find from PRS. So I should also mention that here in this plot here, we compare the PRS that developed from the African American with multi-ancestry and see how they transfer to different regions within Africa. You see that the multi-ancestry PRS was not transferring very well in the Kenya population in East Africa. It's doing equally same performance in Nigeria and also in Ghana, which are West Africa. So my conclusion in this is that most of the so-called the African Americans are mostly from just one region in Africa, which is mostly the Western Africa really. Broadly in Nigeria, and the PRS may not be transferring very well to Eastern Africa, also other population within Africa. So we did the same thing for lipid trait. We found that the PRS from the African ancestry, performing mostly better than the multi-ancestry and also European ancestry PRS. If you're interested, we have this paper published in Nature Medicine. So as you mentioned before, I close the second part. Africa is really very, very young compared to the rest of the population, and this is very important for precision medicine because the whole idea of all this thing we do is because of we don't want Africa to be left out for precision medicine. An average age of African is a teenager, 18 years old, compared with European population, average age is about 45. Asian 33, and Japan is about 50 years old and as average age. But we are very young in Africa. If I give an example of Uganda, where I do most of my work, average age is about 15.7. Compare 15.7 to 8 to 50. We are really very young. So we should be prioritized for precision medicine, really. So average African working age, people between age of 15 to 65, we eat about 1 billion people in the next decade. This is really should sink very well in everybody's mind. By 2050, 40% of the world's children will be living in Africa. That's a lot of children living there in Africa because we have more children produced in Africa. So I'm going to leave some of these thoughts with you. If we want precision medicine to work for the people who will make up 40% of the world children by 2050, we have to study their genomes. We are not doing that yet. It's very important that precision medicine is being targeted to people that really need it. And Africa is where we have most of the young people population. And if we're going to be following them for many years and study them, so we need to study their population. So despite everything we've done in the last few years, Africa is significantly underrepresented in genomics. Look at a plot from one of our paper in Nature Medicine. We show that most of the GWAS that have been done are mainly from European ancestry, about 86%, compared to African, which is about 1.1%. So we've done well, but we're not really there yet. So the top part of my talk today is I'll be very sure that's the gap between discovery and medicine. And so I just have 3 gaps. Of course, there will be many other gaps. So that I believe sits between a GWAS hit, where you find a GWAS signal, and a clinical tool. So one of them is the functional annotation, like GTEx or other similar resources are being built on European tissue. So mapping a novel African variant to a gene, to a tissue, or to a mechanism require ancestry match QTL. It can be QTL or PQTL. And we don't have them now currently at scale. So that's what I think one problem that is currently available. Second one is that PRS, don't travel equally within Africa. I showed an example from one of the paper we did. So PRS is not traveling the same way, it's not transferring the same way to different parts of Africa. And the third one is implementation infrastructure is almost non-existent. So recently, PQTL, EQTL are now coming up. There's one paper from Michelle Ramsey's group, South Africa, where they develop EQTL, amazing resource that are now coming up from Africa. And also this year, with myself and my colleague, Professor Elise Gisegini, we created a PQTL data set that's also very really currently available. But this work was created from only about 500 people. So it's not really a scale, but these are just the beginning initiative to closing the annotation gap. So just to talk a bit about what we did from my work that was led by Okpayemi Shoremekun, who was a postdoc in my group before now moving on to a new role. So we have about 3,000 protein from 500 people from Uganda. About 163 of them, people that have diabetes or pre-diabetes, about 362 control. Trying to see how to address the African representation in omics study. So, of course, we have some very interesting results. I'm not going to go through all the results due to time. We found some association of protein with HbA1c, HGL, and HDL. Also, we identify almost 400 independent PQTL association, 346 of them 6 PQTL, and 53 of them trans PQTL. And we identify some PQTL that never been previously reported before in any kind of population. 50 of those are African ancestry specific PQTL. Okay, we also did some co-localization and also did some Mendelian randomization, and I will just talk about what the implication of this are. For example, from our Mendelian randomization study, we found the AC inhibitor shows some causal association with type 2 diabetes. AC inhibitors already known to be clinically used for hypertension. That means that there's a potential for it to reduce the type 2 diabetes incidence in high-risk individual. There's also potential for personalized medicine and also finding some novel drug target. So the second gap I see is the PRS that is not traveling very well. This is an example here where we developed PRS in African ancestry and tested that in Zulu, South Africa. Of course, we see transferring very, very well. But if you look at it in Uganda, not doing as well as you see in South Africa. That's one example, and there are many also example of that. And I give example of this also. See, the PRS is also not transferring very well in care population. I'm going to just go to the third gap is the implementation gap. So I'm going to show you this one. This slide, I prepared this slide using an AI to explain the gap that we have in the implementation. If you are familiar in this space of pharmacogenomics, you know that CYP2D6 is very popular for metabolizing about a quarter of all prescribed drug. But there are people that they are like a ultra rapid metabolizer. There are many people like that in Ethiopia. They are ultra rapid metabolizer. So meaning that they convert the drug too fast. I'll give you an example from about 29% of Ethiopians carry this duplicate of CYP2D gene because they are ultra rapid metabolizer. And because of that, medication, something like codeine is banned in Ethiopia because the dosaging that we know for codeine came from the European ancestry. Using such dosaging for Ethiopia will be too much for them. And because of that, so the government banned that. That's just an example also of, now we get to a state of not just applying the same algorithm to every population because people are really different genetically. So as I close, I'm going to talk briefly about what I think the future needs to look like. The first one is about we need more data, better infrastructure, capacity building, and African ownership. So the first one is there's this paper by Ambrose Wokam in 2021 where he said that we should sequence 3 million genomes across Africa. I think we should listen to Ambrose Wokam. I think this is one way to go. There's need for us to cover all different regions, all different ethnic groups all across Africa. Currently, we are not at that point. So I'm going to add to what Ambrose said by saying that in genomics today, the biggest gap is also the biggest opportunity. Africa has the deepest genetic diversity, and I've shown that again and again, and the fastest growing earth body, yet it is the most understudied. This imbalance is a challenge we should all aim to solve first. So this is not the first time I'm making this statement. I'm just making it again because it's really very relevant. So we should all aim to focus particularly the imbalance of us being understudied should be what we should target to solve first. Of course, example of East Africa, currently we have a new initiative called GENCO, trying to work in partnership with biotech and big pharmaceutical company, which is amazing to see how we can move on to the next level for African genomics. So the future also, I give an example here of Genomics Africa because I lead this initiative with my colleague John Fabian in South Africa. So the future needs many well-trained African scientists taking the lead in the global stage. This is very, very important. We have done many training before, many technical training. We need to shift the gap a little bit. People have to also learn soft skills. And I put an example here. Soft skill like science communication. How do you become a leader? I'm a leader that can compete in the global stage. How do you lead a consortia? How do you write a grant? All those things are very important. They're as important as you learning genomic analysis or bioinformatics. But when you learn all those bioinformatics and genomic analysis, you have to learn the risk stuff, which is the soft skills. How can you be so confident and also do science communication? So in Kenya, Africa, we are training 120 people, not only the hard skill, also the soft skill. There will be exchange program. People travel from Africa to other country. Recently we are giving out some seed funding to a few people. So training some postdoc. If you're interested in Kenya, Africa, so you read everything. Read here people that are publishing enriching genetics and see everything that we have as a vision for the next 5 years. So we should also, I think this has been talked by Zeni about terms of need for data sovereignty, equitable collaboration, and community trust. So this is my last slide, and my charge to you, everybody in the room today, to the next generation is that personally, I believe that the next era of genomics can be shaped by African scientists designing the future of genomics, using African genomic diversity to transform medicine that work for everyone, whether they're African or they are not Africans. Your generation has a choice to be that generation that make African genomes most visible in global science, or the generation that build a new global science around African genomic diversity. So thank you very much. I'm going to end there.
Thank you very much, Professor Fatimo. That was a very informative presentation, and it was actually packed with a lot of information, and it was actually pretty fast. And although I followed a lot of it, like some parts of it, I'm sure that I speak for a number of the other participants when I say that there are some parts that we would definitely need to go back to look at. I also want to ask if we would be able to get the slides
Yes,
sent
if you
to
want
us
to,
so that
yes.
we can see them. All right. So I think someone asked in the chat box, so the slides will be gotten and then sent to us afterwards. So at this point, I would like to ask if anyone has a question to ask about the presentation. I know it was a lot, but we may have one or two questions to ask our keynote speakers at this point, either Professor Fatima or Professor Zane Lombard.
I have another a question in the chat box.
All right. Okay, yes, we have some questions in the chat. So the first one is actually directed at Professor Lombard. It says, how were you able to position the DDD Africa work as a priority against infectious diseases, which take up most of Africa's health research funding? And what advice do you have for young scientists working on rare disease? Because there seems to be more funding and research in European countries. So how do we stay focused on African problems instead of drifting towards where the money and opportunities are?
Thanks for that question. I think that's a tough question, and I think that is something we have to be aware of and work with. I think the question around setting up rare disease as a priority is really not going. There's always going to be multitudes of issues and problems and things to fund, and I think you have to focus on your area of interest. And even in that first paragraph of writing your grant, make it clear why this needs to be supported. What is the issue? What is the problem? How does it impact individuals where you live as well as globally? And I think that is also key, is to think beyond just the African cohort that you want to work on, but how your work will actually have benefit for the rest of the world, other individuals as well. And just making that clear in that first paragraph of your grant is just essential to really grab the reviewer and the audience that's going to fund your research. So I think that would be my advice. The question around drifting and moving elsewhere, I think this is the reality of genomic research in Africa. And I think the important thing here to remember, maybe two pieces of advice, is to really look at opportunities outside of Africa as training opportunities and ways to learn about new techniques, new infrastructure, and ways of how you could bring this back to Africa and to the country. That I think is an important way to look at this. It's not about leaving the continent, but it's about taking up opportunities that can be enriching in whether that's with you returning to your country where you come from, or engaging with a network of individuals, whether that's through a society or a group like this, in training others and sharing the knowledge. I think that is just one important thing. And then the other important piece of it is to always think of yourself as a champion for genomics. Wherever you go, is use your voice to set the research agenda and to keep reminding yourself of why you got into genomic science and what it is that you want to achieve. It might be that you're going somewhere else in the world and you're working somewhere else, but that agenda setting opportunity should always be at the forefront of your mind, and using every opportunity you have to kind of bring that conversation back, I think, is a really important thing. Thanks.
Thank you very much. It was actually a very enlightening response that you gave, and I hope, Dr. Farida, that has indeed answered your question. We have another one from Abdul Kudus, and I think I would direct this question at Professor Fatimo. He said the downfall of 54 gene seems to have been a setback for genomic development in Africa. What advice do you have for upcoming generation to avoid such occurrence?
Okay, so I'm a scientist. I don't work in a biotech company. I was very close to 54G because I was part of they set up the partnership called the NCDHS, which I was co-lead, and we're doing amazing work. And to today, I'm very proud of what we did with them. They had their problems. So the problem they had, I don't think it was really spectacular, really, because many biotech companies also had problem, with their founder. There are many issues that may have happened. There are many opinions, of course. I can't speak to whatever thing that happened, but I would say if you want to go to business, just be ready, understand what the business is all about, and understand the failure that will happen and how you could navigate that. So that's all I would say, because I'm not a business person, really. So, but things happen. Many people that start business for the first time, they tend to fail. Yes, this also contribute to this. Experience, dealing with investors and all that. These are all our problems. So if I were to do something like that, for example, I'll probably do it slowly. I think 54G was really amazing, and they were moving too fast. At the pace they were moving at that time was just like, ooh. It's amazing to know that we collected sample in Nigeria just within 2 years, 100,000 samples. Nobody has ever done that before anywhere in the world. Nobody. But we employ so many people. We employ so many professors. I was having meeting with them every week and all that. Amazing work. Yeah, maybe if you are a new company just starting, maybe you should not go too fast. Maybe that's one. Maybe also investors, communication between you and investors should be clear. This is genomics. You're not selling anything. If the investor have an idea that if you just do genomics for 2 years, 3 years, we are getting return on investment. This is not the way to do that. Nobody can get any return on investment within 3 years or 5 years. I think maybe those communications are not very clear between them and the investors. There are many things that may have gone wrong. I don't know the full detail. I don't want to blame anybody, but I'm so proud about what we've done. Sample are still there in Nigeria, in NIMA, 100,000 sample, and when things become unfold and we're able to sequence the remaining sample, we go ahead with the science. What is most important for me is that we get the science at the science zone. But if you are talented, you want to build a company, you go and learn from. There are books on people that fail. Failure is not really the end of anything. Learn from them what they did wrong and avoid that. But what I would say is that since then, the CEO of the 54G at that time, it's not because many of you are young people here. It's not pushing back and say, "Nah, I fail." It's doing something else now, and it's doing something amazing. It's not like saying, "Oh, everything has collapsed now. I'm now a fail." No, it's doing amazing work. He has a new company that is doing very well. I would like everybody to also learn something like that from him. That is back and doing something else and doing very well. So that's where I will just leave that particular question.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that response. Abdul Kudus, I hope that has answered your question and perhaps a question that some of us also had. So, Professor Fatumo, the next question is also directed to you. It's from Emmanuel, and he's saying his question centers on NCDs, specifically early cancer detection and biomarker discovery. As young researchers, we face a major challenge, a shortage of African genomic data, along with limited hands-on training and mentorship opportunities locally. Since most of the funding and advanced training for genomics are concentrated in Western countries, how can we build a career around solving African health problems without getting pulled towards where the funding and opportunities currently are?
Okay, so good question. There are many questions within this question. So the first one, you're talking about getting pulled towards the funding. So once I live in the UK, and I don't see anything wrong if you see that there are opportunities for you somewhere else. I live in the UK, but everything I do is Africa. Today, I'm on my way flying to Uganda again. I'm going to be there for 1 week. That's where I do my work. But if the UK can pay my salary, pay my staff, and I still do African data, analyze African data, and solve African problem, what is wrong with that? There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So if you see opportunity somewhere else, but what I'm against is that people you go to the US and then you completely forget that you have a responsibility to do an amazing science on African data set, and you're now working on UK Biobank, working at the European Ancestry data set. I think that's I'm kind of like, oh, maybe this is not the right way to do it. But if you are doing what you want to do, if you were you were still living in Nigeria or Ghana or wherever you are living, and you are somewhere else, why not? One of the problems people always talk about brain drain. And I always give an example of me when I finished my PhD. My first degree, my second degree, my PhD, they were all in Nigeria. I studied in Nigeria. People always forget that. I try to remind people. I studied everything in Nigeria. I wanted a postdoc in Nigeria. There was no opportunity for me in Nigeria for postdoc. No opportunity for anybody to train me, because that was the earlier age of genomics. I had an opportunity of going to the US for my postdoc and also going to the UK for my postdoc. And some people were saying, "Oh, that's brain drain," and I told them that the real brain drain is if I have stayed back in Nigeria and the equipment that we use, I don't have it, and my brain is just draining down there. That's the real brain drain. When you are not able to do everything, and you just become useless. That is the real brain drain. So, but now I move abroad and I'm able to still use my knowledge to solve the same problem that I would have solved if I were living in Nigeria. What is the problem with that? So that's the first thing. So don't be afraid to go if you want to go, if you want to go anywhere and learn, but make sure that you are trying to solve African problem. That is the first thing. So second problem you talk about is the funding. No, there are funding. If you get money from NIH, of course, you use it to solve that to do data. All the fund I have funding from the NIH, from the Wellcome Trust, from the MRC. All of those I mentioned, they are not based in Nigeria or in Uganda, but we use that funding to analyze African data sets. So look for funding everywhere. If your country is not giving that funding, look for funding where you can get the funding. But just remember that you have to compete globally. You have to compete with people in Oxford, in Cambridge, in Harvard. You have to put yourself in that stage where you are in the right mental stage where you can compete with people globally. And the other thing you mentioned in your question is about there's no data. See, the issue of there's no data has been there for a very, very long time. See, use what is available. Don't just look for excuse. When we published the first GWAS of cardiometabolic trait that I mentioned, 14,000 people, that paper was published in Cell. At that time, there was no data. When they published the first GWAS of kidney function in Uganda, that data was only about 3,000 people. There's no data, but we keep on publishing what is available. So now we are now a bit more innovative. We are saying that let's form a partnership. I have small data, you have small data, you have small data. Let's put it together. But we cannot just sit down and say there's no data. There are some data that are available. We should analyze them. We should be very innovative on the way to analyze what is available. Because if we wait for when data will be available, we're going to wait for a long time.
Thank you very much for that response. The next question is from Esmail from Ethiopia, and well, he's directing his question to both of these speakers. He's asking if there's any room for, Professor Lombard, he's asking, is there any room for collaborative work on breast cancer in genomics? I'm not sure in which context he means the question, but is there any room for collaborative work on breast cancer in genomics?
So I would answer that by saying, I think what has been beneficial for me to be part of different groups like CoGSAYR Africa, like DSI Africa, is that you learn who's working on which parts of genomics. And it's a good way to network and to find those partners in breast cancer genomics. So, for instance, my group is not working in breast cancer, we're doing rare disease, but I know of a few people in my university in my country that's interested in breast cancer. So reaching out to people that you connect with, like myself and Shegun today, we can most probably refer you to colleagues that are working in your specific field of interest, but also joining networks like CoGSAYR Africa. And this network is a good way to learn about people working in these different areas of expertise and connecting with them. And I think that's the first way that you make that network connection to find somebody who could work in the same area that you're interested in.
Great response. Thank you very much. The next one is from Dr. Gladys Ibrahim, who is also our executive director. The question is, how do we create a balance between innovation and African data protection? As it stands, most of the big pharma companies with real capacity to translate our findings into diagnostics and medicines are located in the US and other developed countries. In as much as we have the genetic diversity and can generate the data, how do we ensure that it doesn't just remain at that, knowing fully well that we have limited capacity for translation? So she's saying that she would appreciate a response from both Professor Lombard and Prof. Fatumo. But I think Prof. Fatumo has touched on that in his previous answer, but we'll listen to what he has to say.
Yeah, I can also mention that how do you create that balance is by you becoming a leader and try to develop your own soft skill. So now I mentioned that we have GENCO. So GENCO is an initiative where we are talking with the big pharmaceutical company all over the world. And at this stage, there's an agreement that all the data, all the sample will remain in Africa. I'm part of GENCO. I'm collecting sample in Uganda. So the sample from Uganda is not going to be shipped to California. My sample from Uganda will be shipped to Ede in Nigeria, where it will be sequenced. After it will be sequenced, it will be shipped back to me in Uganda. Analysis will be done between the biotech company, pharmaceutical company, and my group in Uganda. That's a lot of changes that have happened. In the past, that would not happen that way in the past. In the past, probably, of course, all the samples will go to California, or go to Bristol, or go to somewhere, and some postdoc will be analyzing them in where they are. But now we've learned a lot. We have our confidence has been improved. We know how to talk with all those big pharmaceutical companies and say, this is how we want to do science. So it's not a stage of where you are begging. So this is how I want to do science. Because they are going to get benefit from it eventually, but we have done better. So there are a lot of equipment to do whole genome sequencing in Nigeria, South Africa, and also a few places in Africa. And that's where those samples have been done. So samples are not going to be leaving Africa. They will stay there in Africa. That's just one breakthrough. And we also had a lot of capacity building that have been done. People know much more better in terms of translation than it used to be. I don't know whether there's any comment to make on this.
No, I agree with you, Shegun. It's that learning that soft skill of negotiation. I think that's so important, and feeling empowered to negotiate. This is not a situation where big pharma companies are doing us a favor. I think it should be approached as an equal partnership with benefit going both ways, and that benefit sharing needs to be negotiated. And I think that's the way to facilitate it. I think the other thing around talking about data protection, I think there's lots of exciting developments happening around the ABI, building capacity and infrastructure locally so that when this data is generated, it can come back to the country where the samples were collected, and data can be stored locally, and federated data analysis can happen in that way. So there is, this negotiation that needs to happen about making sure that there's benefit going both ways, because there's definitely benefit to pharma companies, but there should also be benefit to the African people and the African researchers who participate in these collaborations.
Thank you very much. Those were really, really great and enlightening responses. And I know that has answered the question and enlightened us even further on how we can protect our own data, even as we do more genomic research. We have a question directed at Professor Fatumo. It says that one of the major opportunities in genomics in Africa is the continent's remarkable genetic diversity. But this diversity also presents a significant challenge, particularly because some regions and populations remain underrepresented. So, what strategies do you think can be put in place to ensure that these underrepresented populations are adequately included? And he says that he's asking because understanding the genetic diversity across different African populations is crucial for developing more accurate insights into disease susceptibility, treatment responses, and other health outcomes that may be particularly relevant to the continent.
Yeah, very good question, really. And I'll answer it in the maybe you may not like it, See, this is your organization. If I draw a map of Africa and I put dots where your members are, it will look similar to the map I show. True or false? So what can you do to ensure that every person or every nation, whether they are from Egypt or from Morocco or from Cameroon, from South Africa, are all represented? It's the same answer. It's the same answer. So if you know what you can do to your organization to make sure that because this is called, it's an African organization. And I'm not sure that I've not had some names that I'm looking for from the Northern Africa force. I've not seen them on the call today. So so that map is very similar to your organization. So what we can do is the same thing as what you can do. So we just keep on ensuring that number one, we have to identify that there's a problem, and which we know. And now that map I show now is not really well updated because now we have amazing colleagues doing great work in Tunisia, in Egypt and Morocco and other places, and also data coming from those places. So we should have an updated version. But really, we should get to a point where every ethnic group all across Africa is represented, because that's how we'll be able to capture the genetic diversity.
Thank you very much for that response. I think those are the questions that we have from the chat box. I don't know if anyone wants to raise a hand and ask their question directly. Okay, I don't think anyone wants to. So those are all the questions. Okay, Elvis, I think he raised his hand initially. So Elvis, you can unmute and ask your question. Elvis, we can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you now.
All right. Good day, everyone. I'm Elvis from Ghana, and good greetings to Prof. Segun. My question is, now from Prof. Segun's presentation, it's clearly stated that data generation is no excuse, and precision infrastructure is almost non-existent in Africa. So in this view, the bigger bottleneck right now is building infrastructure and community trust to translate existing data into actual clinical applications on the continent. So in this vein, where do we start from? Because data generation is no more an excuse. How do we start building this precision infrastructure and community trust? And this is very possible because Prof. Segun, we met at Hanover early this year, and there was one presenter, Professor Lindy from Alabama. She is also into precision medicine, and we saw how with his data generation, the impact of the community is gaining her trust in the work she does, and how she's expanding it into various areas in US. So how do we now build this infrastructure, the next stage of genomic medicine? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Evans. I should say that things have really improved compared to pre-CoGSAYR Africa. We're not where we used to be before, and I'm sure that with all this new initiative, whether it's a GENCO or agenda or the national initiative, it will continue to get better. So we should not just keep talking about what is not available. I think we should just focus on what can we do with what is already in existence. There are a lot of things. When I said I was looking for a postdoc in those years, There was nothing in Nigeria. There was no Christian Happy. Christian Happy also was away in Harvard. There was no the center they built in Ede at that time. There were nothing. Now we have so many a bit two center I know in South Africa. Those things were not there at that time. So there are a lot of things that have changed. There are in terms of infrastructure, in terms of capacity, in terms of leadership, a lot of things have changed. So we should just leverage what is currently available. Thank you. I see that Vicky is on call. If you want a networking, I think you should also be part of the African Society of Human Genetics. That is the way. That is the way to grow. You cannot do anything in isolation. As an organization, there are a lot of training within the African Society of Human Genetics. Also, the H3 Bionet. A lot of bioinformatics training there. That is the way to grow. You have to find your way, and just grow and develop your skill. But when you develop your skill, don't develop only analysis skill or technical skill. Also develop the soft skill. They are very, very important. What will differentiate you between just an analyst and a leader in the field is your soft skill. You have to get to that point where you develop both.
Thank you very much for that response. I think we've taken all of the questions at this point. I also want to just read out what Dr. Vicky wrote in the chat. Dr. Shegun, she was saying she wants to thank you and highlight that even while living in the UK, you are deeply committed to training African leaders and supporting African initiatives in addition to your Afrocentric research. So that's something Dr. Vicky said in the chat. At this point, I want to say a very big thank you to our keynote speakers. It has indeed been an enlightening discussion and even conversation. And thank you for how you answered our questions and clarified areas that were kind of blurry to us. It was amazing. And we will go back to look at these videos because it's actually been streamed and it will be available on YouTube. So Professor Shegun would request for your slides so you can have it sent to us and then can go through it again. And Professor Lombard, I think you as well. Thank you very much for being here. And at this point, we'll be moving on to the next segment of the event. Thank you very much. So at this point, we would be showcasing the cohort of the CGI Fellowship, and that will be taken by Dr. Farida, who is Educations and Capacity Lead at CoGSAYR Africa.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, I'm Farida. So thank you so much to Professor Lombard and Professor Fatsumo for their really insightful session. I think I learned a lot. So yes, for the CoGSAYR second year anniversary, we would like to showcase some of our work so far. I know Dr. Gladys has mentioned that we had our CGI fellowship, and today we just want to celebrate some of those fellows for embodying excellence throughout the fellowship and the impacts that they were able to, all their dedication to the fellowship throughout. And so we'll start with a brief overview of what the fellowship was, so we know what went into this fellowship. And so we had the CoGSAYR Genomic for Impact Fellowship, which was a 10 weeks program where we trained young scientists who had a lot of interest in genomics but had no prior exposure to what genomics was or what bioinformatics was. And we took them through lectures, discussion sections for 8 weeks where they were able to learn about the basics of genomics and how to apply it to African health challenges. And then we had the capstone project where they were able to apply what they had learned to some of the African health problems they identified and propose solutions or framework to those problems. And I just want to highlight that for this fellowship, like Gladys had mentioned earlier, we had over 1,800 applications from 40 African countries, but we're only able to pick 52 fellows. And out of those 52 fellows, we're able to then go ahead and select 10 fellows, of which they were chosen as the top 10 fellows because of their dedication, consistency, and their active participation throughout the fellowship. And these fellows will be going on to the next part of the fellowship, which is the hands-on training. And so I would be revealing the top 10 fellows We have Dr. Oluwapelumi Akinajani from Nigeria, who's a medical doctor. We also have Crystolina from Namibia, a public health researcher. We have Suleiman Ahmed, a medical student from Nigeria, Akwan Udwa from Nigeria, a biomedical scientist, and Nancy Jepko from Kenya. We have Doris from Nigeria, Maureen from Kenya, Waime from Morocco, who is a bioinformatics engineer. We have Blessing from Nigeria, a pharmacy student, Abdurrahman Rajiv also from Nigeria, and Naomi from Nigeria, a medical doctor. So congratulations to our top 10 fellows. And these fellows will be having their hands-on training with Inkaba Biotech West Africa. And I know that Mr. Lukman, the managing director for Inkaba Biotech West Africa, is on the call, and we just want to say a big thank you for making this possible for the fellows who would now be transitioning from the didactic lectures to actual hands-on training on how to employ this genomic technologies that they've learned about during the fellowship. Now I would stop talking and just we would like to also showcase some of our top projects. So like I said, the fellows had a capstone project where they got to present or propose solutions to some of the African health problems. Like Professor Fatima says, we already have data. What are we doing with the data we have? And so the fellows had proposed some solutions with what we already have on ground on how to move forward from talking about the problems to actually having solutions. And first, I would be handing over to the first team so you can hear from them, which is Team 6, who came second in the capstone project competition. And they will be talking about their nanomedicine approach to tackling triple-negative breast cancer in Africa. So, Ahmad, you have the floor. You can go on and tell us about your project.
Thank you very much, Dr. Obrimo. Good day, everyone. I am Ahmad Alonso Sulaiman, and I am presenting on behalf of my team, which is Team 6. And our project topic is on engineered exosome-based precision and medicine framework for triple-negative breast cancer in Africa. In Africa, we know that continent, which is twice the global average, and it also strikes younger women with extreme aggression. And because we lack affordable targeted therapies, we often rely on a one-size-fits-all approach, which often either leads to ineffective treatment or a life-threatening toxicity. So our study aims to develop an integrated precision and medicine platform which combines pharmacogenomic stratification and engineered exosome-mediated targeted delivery system for TNBC in African population. But I'm sure we would have to ask that, okay, why choose exosomes over other conventional systems? Unlike conventional therapies, exosomes actually act as a natural molecular vehicle that inherently drives cell-to-cell communication. And because they are easily engineered and customized, we can basically manipulate their surfaces for high precision targeting. And they also possess natural biocompatibility and low immunogenicity. And this allows them to seamlessly bypass the standard multi-drug resistance mechanisms like efflux pumps, which allows them to directly deliver payloads into the heart of the tumor cells, while of course minimizing the harm to healthy tissues. So our methodology for this workflow for this precision platform is structured into 5 phases. So the first phase is the genomic patient stratification, where we start with a localized PCR-based screening to identify functional polymorphisms in genes that might influence our treatment, like the dipyrimidine dehydrogenase genes and the thiopurine methyltransferase genes. And this screening is basically conducted during the initial diagnostic biopsy or the blood workup phase simultaneously with the histology to allow for a genotype-guided chemotherapy dosing, which of course would account for variability, like I mentioned, while avoiding treatment bottlenecks. Now, between the second and the third phases, there is a phase that allows us to refine the molecular targets that are appropriate and suited for our population of TNBC patients, because we know that African patients often have we have quite a different somatic landscape compared to the European reference cohorts. So imported biomarkers tend to be inadequate to design our precision system. So to achieve this, we are going to get the African TNBC genomic data from publicly available data sets like the Cancer Genome Atlas, with a focus on genomic alterations that are commonly associated with progressions of TNBC, like TP53, MyC, BRCA1, BRCA2, EGFR. And using tools like Mozu, we run a multiple sequence alignment against reference sequences to identify unique SNPs, indels, and copy number variations. So this alignment-centered analysis would allow for the stratification of biomarkers to target cancer cells based strictly on geographic location. And by uncovering these population-specific molecular signatures, we can perfectly match our targeting ligands to the exact receptor overexpressions that are found in our specific African patients. And this would allow us to radically increase diagnostic and therapeutic precision. Following this, the exosomes are going to be isolated from allogenic mesenchymal stem cells via differential ultracentrifugation. And the process is going to be validated using nanoparticle tracking analysis to ensure we have adequate size, and then transmission electron microscopy to confirm the morphological integrity, and Western blotting for confirmation of the surface markers and to ensure that there are no contaminants. Then our platform is now going to, then we would have the encapsulation of hydrophilic drugs like 5-fluorouracil, cisplatin, which are conventional chemotherapeutic drugs, and hydrophobic chemotherapies like taxanes. So using electroporation or sonication, depending on whether it's hydrophilic or hydrophobic. But of course, this platform is not limited to these standard chemotherapeutic drugs. It can be loaded with diverse advanced therapies, including gene therapies, small interference RNAs, microRNAs, or even synergistic combination of all these therapies to bypass multi-drug resistance mechanisms. Following this, the exosome membranes are going to be pegylated to enhance their stability and to reduce the immune clearance. And then anti-EGFR aptamers and folate receptor ligands are then going to be attached to the surface to enable dual homing of the TNBC cells. And of course, this is because evidence has shown that these TNBC cells tend to overexpress these molecular targets. Finally, we are going to validate this approach using a rigorous two-tier process. Firstly, there's going to be an in vitro evaluation where the engineered platform is going to be tested in TNBC cell lines to assess cellular uptake, cytotoxicity, apoptosis induction, and inhibition of cell migration. And this is going to be followed by in vivo validation in athymic nude mice models. And we expect to see significantly enhanced tumor regression compared to the free chemotherapy, with a dramatic reduction in off-target accumulation in like the heart or the kidneys or other organs. And also, because we are planning to use lyophilization, this platform becomes deployable in rural clinics without needing to have ultra low temperature freezers. So what does this actually mean for the future of oncology in Africa? So the innovation here actually is the integration. And of course, while this specific framework targets TNBC, it actually serves as a model for oncology therapy by simply swapping out the genomic stratification panels, adapting the surface targeting ligands, or even altering the loaded therapeutic payloads. This exact workflow can actually be pivoted to treat entirely different types of cancers. And we acknowledge that as a proof of concept framework, experimental data and specific genotypes with those algorithms are the next steps. However, it is highly encouraging that exosome-based therapies are actively moving through clinical trials and showing massive promise for direct integration into real-world healthcare facilities. And this scalable, affordable architecture is our own attempt at building a foundation from transitioning from toxic one-size-fits-all treatment to a right dose, right target care for women across the continent. And these are our references. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ahmad, and thank you to the group. I just want to highlight again that our fellows were people who were at very beginning, early stage exposure to genomics and just had high interest. And they were able to translate the knowledge from the CGI Fellowship with the help of their mentors to come up with such brilliant ideas. And I am incredibly proud of all our fellows and all the ideas they came up with. But again, it's just to showcase that if you give young Africans the opportunity and the resources they need, they would change the world. So congratulations to the group for the second place position. Now we'll be moving on to the group who secured first place at the capstone project presentation, which is group 7, and they would be presenting their work on why large-scale genomic screening in Africa has not translated to has not translated to routine anti-malaria drug resistance screening. And they also propose a conceptual pathway into implementing the information and the knowledge and the data we have currently on anti-malaria drug resistance to actual screening. So yes, I'll be handing over now to Habiba Raji, who will be presenting on behalf of the group to just tell us about their work.
Yeah. Good day, everyone. I'm Habibat Uluwatobiwaji. Hope you can hear me clearly. Sorry. Okay.
Yes,
Yeah,
we can.
I'm
Please go ahead.
Habibat Uluwatobiwaji, representing Group 7. Today, I'll be presenting our research titled "Why Has Expanded Genomic Capacity Not Translated into Routine Anti-Malaria Drug Resistance Surveillance in Africa?" To understand the urgency of this project, we must look at the immediate crisis. In 2024, malaria caused 610,000 deaths globally, with Africa bearing roughly 95% of this burden. Our frontline defense, the artemisinin-based combination therapy, is under severe threat from emerging mutation in the PF-COH13 gene. We must continuously monitor these markers to guide treatment policies and stop resistant parasites from spreading. Historically, our surveillance evolved from slow therapeutic efficacy studies to tracking specific molecular markers and finally to rapid next-generation sequencing. To scale this, massive networks like Malaria Gen and the Africa CDC Pathogen Genomic Initiatives were formed. Despite these technological leaps, genomic surveillance is rarely used in routine public health. If you direct your attention to the map and pie chart, you would notice a striking disconnect between possessing the technology and actively using it. Our map displays physical sequencing capacity. Countries like South Africa, Nigeria, and Kenya are shown in dark blue, indicating they possess advanced next-generation sequencing capacity. Meanwhile, the areas highlighted in red represent regions with no in-country genomic sequencing capacity. However, the pie chart tells a different story about integration. Despite possessing advanced next-generation sequencing capacity, South Africa falls into the red pie slice for limited surveillance integration. Nigeria and Kenya fall into the large light blue slice, meaning their use for this technology remains partial or restricted to research. Only a tiny fraction, such as Rwanda, in the dark blue slice, has achieved true routine surveillance integration. Why does this gap exist? We identified 4 major bottlenecks. First, financial barriers. Surveillance relies on unpredictable donor funding, and the equipment setup costs average a prohibitive $12,500. Secondly, governance. National malaria control programs lack clear threshold for when to change drug guidelines. Third, we have the workforce deficit. We face a massive shortage, needing roughly 1,000 trained staff across African reference labs. And fourth, we have technical barriers. There are no standardized protocols across the continent for collecting molecular data. The sequencing technology exists, we all agree, but this bottleneck keep it trapped in the lab. To answer how we overcome this gap, I would now walk you through our proposed conceptual pathway. This six-step solution is designed to move us from isolated research to active public health policy. Step 1 focuses on field diagnostic. Community health workers should collect samples using simple molecular tests targeted at established markers like KELCH13 mutations. Instead of waiting weeks for expensive centralized testing, we test for known threats right where the patients are. Step 2 involves portable nanopore sequencing. Large lab machines are simply too expensive. By using portable platforms, we can process sequencing and return resistance results on-site in under 5 hours for less than $25 a sample. This directly bypasses that $12,500 setup barrier. Step 3 addresses local bioinformatics. We propose using offline laptop-based dashboard to analyze results in real time. Crucially, this genomic data cannot stay hidden in a lab. It needs to feed directly into routine health systems that ministries already use every day, such as the DHIS2. Step 4 focuses on sustainable financing. We cannot rely on unpredictable donor projects forever. We need to shift toward dedicated domestic budget lines. This would be supported by pooled regional financing through the Africa CDC, allowing African nations to buy supplies together at much lower cost. Step 5 establishes clear policy and governance. Countries should adopt benchmarks such as the World Health Organization's greater than 5% PFK13 mutation threshold. A multidisciplinary committee would manage this. When resistance hits 5%, the system automatically triggers a change in drug policy, completely removing long delays in decision making. Finally, Step 6 ensures public health action. Genomic experts should be embedded directly inside National Malaria Control Program to solve the massive workforce gap we identified. We recommend a service for scholarship scheme. This trains new scientists and requires them to stay in public health lab, stopping brain drain. In conclusion, expanding sequencing technology alone is not enough. Routine genomic anti-malaria surveillance across Africa is achievable, but only if we bridge the gap between the laboratory and public health policy through domestic investment and clear governance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abibat. Again, another great work by the team as their capstone project, and they were mentored by Dr. Kayode Adeyemi. Again, I think this is just a testament of what young talents can achieve in Africa with just the right training and the right platform. And that's what CoGSAYR set out to do, to be that platform, that community for young Africans to just help provide them with the training and the exposure they need to be able to use genomics to solve African health problem. And I think we've shown that we've been able to do that with just very little resources and funding. And this is just cohort 1. So we're only just getting started. And I know I wasn't asked to do this by the executive team or anybody, but if this is the future that you see for African genomics in the future, then you should come talk to us. And yes, we are very open to partner with organizations. So if there's any organization on this call that would like to partner with us, we would really welcome that. So yes, from the education and capacity building team, thank you to everyone who contributed to the fellowship in one way or the other, from our module leads to our mentors, our judges at the Capstone Project, and our partner in Kaba Biotech West Africa. Thank you. And that's all from me.
Thank you very much, Dr. Farida and the Educations and Capacity Building team, as well as the fellows who presented for their teams. At this point in the event, we would be having the panel session, which is actually the final session in today's event. And that would be moderated by Dr. Dada Rachel. So she would be introducing our speakers and then be moderating the conversation between them. So you have the floor, Dr. Dada.
Thank you very much, Anavami. Good afternoon, everyone. And I hope we've been enjoying our time here today. I'd like to confirm that I am audible, please.
Yes, you are.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, so we've had a lot of interesting conversations today, and we're about to have another interesting conversation. And this afternoon, we're going to be exploring a topic that I believe all of us have, heard in parts during the keynote sessions today. And we're going to be looking at what we need in Africa. So we're looking at data, people, and the road ahead in terms of genomics leadership. And we'll be joined by two very important panelists. We have Dr. Samson Adeyemi and Dr. Victoria Precious Dimbawari. And they would both be focusing on different parts of the theme. Dr. Adeyemi will be focusing on collected, not led, closing Africa's genomic leadership gap, while Dr. Nimbawari will be focusing on we have the people and building Africa's genomic future together. But before they take the floor to join the panel, I'd like to just read their bios. I'll be starting with Dr. Samson Adeyemi. Dr. Samson Adeyemi is a senior pharmaceutical research scientist at the Wheat Advanced Drug Delivery Platform, University of Witwatersrand, South Africa. He's also an adjunct professor of drug delivery at the University of Massachusetts, Lowell, United States. His research integrates nanomedicine, bioinformatics, and precision therapeutics to develop advanced drug delivery systems for cancer and infectious diseases. His expertise spans targeted drug delivery, biomaterials, exosome engineering, polymeric nanocarriers, and precision medicine. He has authored numerous peer-reviewed publications and book chapters and serves as a reviewer for several international pharmaceutical science journals. Dr. Adeyemi is also the Vice President, Communications and Operations of the Nigerian Bioinformatics and Genomics Network, NBGN, where he champions bioinformatics research, capacity building, and scientific collaboration across Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, please clap your virtual hands to welcome Dr. Adeyemi to the panel. Our second panelist is Dr. Victoria Precious Nimbawari. She is a genomic medicine researcher, implementation scientist, biomedical informatician, and science engagement advocate at the University of Cape Town, South Africa. She is a senior lecturer in the Division of Human Genetics, Department of Pathology, where she leads research aimed at translating genomic discoveries into equitable and sustainable healthcare solutions across Africa. Her work brings together genomics, data science, implementation research, health system strengthening, and education to address some of Africa's most pressing health challenges. She has made significant contributions to research in sickle cell disease, pharmacogenomics, rare and inherited diseases, genomic education, and biomedical data standards, with a strong emphasis on ensuring that advances in precision medicine are accessible, relevant, and beneficial to African populations. Beyond research, Dr. Nimbawari is deeply committed to building genomic medicine capacity across the continent. She has led and contributed to the development of genomic medicine training programs for healthcare professionals, researchers, and students, helping to strengthen Africa's genomics workforce. She is also passionate about public engagement and improving genomic literacy. Through initiatives such as MGen Africa, which is Mobile Genomics Africa, she works to make genomics more accessible to diverse audiences, fostering meaningful dialogue between scientists, healthcare professionals, patients, educators, and communities. Dr. Nimbawari is actively involved in several international collaborations. She serves as Secretary of the African Society of Human Genetics, is a trustee of the Global Genomics Network for Education and Training, and plays a leadership role within the Sickle in Africa Consortium. At the University of Cape Town, she also co-convenes postgraduate programs in computational health informatics, where she helps train the next generation of genomic scientists and health data specialists. Her research has led to the development of innovative implementation frameworks, digital health resources, and capacity building programs that support the integration of genomics into healthcare across Africa. More recently, her work has expanded into emerging areas such as carrier biology and the application of artificial intelligence to precision medicine. Through her research, education, and public engagement, Dr. Nimbaware is helping shape a future in which genomic medicine is more inclusive, impactful, and responsive to the needs of African communities. Please make welcome again with your virtual hands, Dr. Nimbaware, to the panel. Good afternoon to Dr. Adeyemi and Dr. Nimbaware. It is a pleasure to be hosting this panel session with both of you, and it's really nice to have you guys here. And as we have introduced, or as I have introduced, we're talking about leadership in genomics in Africa. Professor Fatima spoke about us having the data, but not leading or choosing what is being done with it. And so my first question is going to go to both panelists. I'd like to just know your opinion. Tell us about what leadership in genomics means to you. Do you think it is something about, oh, are we authoring enough publications? Are we owning our samples? What exactly do you think leadership in genomics means? Or is it a combination of everything? So I think we'll start with Dr. Adeyemi.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rachel Dada, and good morning to everyone from this side. For me, leadership is much broader than sample ownership or first authorship. Those are important, but they are indicators of leadership rather than leadership itself. So true leadership for me means that African scientists and institutions are involved across entire research value chain. That is from designing the research question to designing the study itself, collecting and analyzing the data, interpreting the findings, and of course, publishing the work. Like Fatima also highlighted. Of course, protecting the intellectual property is another dimension of the value chain, developing applications and ensuring that African communities benefit from the outcome. So if an international consortium, for instance, comes to Africa with a research question that is already designed elsewhere, collect samples in Africa, send the data overseas for analysis, and publishes the major papers without substantial African scientific leadership. For me, and then they return with findings, and that is just mere collaboration. But I will question whether it represents genuine African leadership. So I think we should move from a sample contribution model to a scientific partnership model. So leadership should therefore include African-led study design, African principal investigators leading the work, meaningful authorship, data governance, also computational capacity, biobanking, technology development, and intellectual property, and as well as ultimately translation into products and policies. So the goal is not to exclude anyone. The goal is to ensure that Africans are not merely participants in the genomic revolution. They are architects of it, and they are taking the lead. So that is what leadership will mean for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. So we're going beyond just first authorship. Those are just indicators. True leadership is more deep, is more it involves more things than just collecting data. Dr. Nimbaware, please would like to hear your thoughts on genomics leadership in Africa.
Thank you so much for having me here. Yes, I completely agree with Dr. Sampson. So I think leadership definitely requires you to be technically competent in genomics, but it requires more than that. It requires someone who's authentic and ethical in their research conduct, because with genomics comes a lot of ethical issues that require one to build trust with the communities they work with and with other researchers and within the communities of practice that we're in. And leadership also requires confidence to formulate your own research questions exposure and competences in scientific writing and grant developing, having strong mentorship for yourself and also mentoring others, and access to networks. And I think importantly, leadership in genomics for me is the ability to give yourself permission to lead. Very often, I find talented young African scientists waiting until someone gives them a title or a grant or a senior position or an invitation before they see themselves as leaders. Part of our responsibility as trainers is to help participants recognize that leadership can begin much earlier. You can lead an idea, you can lead a collaboration, you can lead a research question or a new way of doing something before you have any formal leadership position. I think that's what leadership means for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nyambawari, for that perspective. Our community largely comprises young, enthusiastic scientists, and it's really nice for us to know that leadership does not begin when you get a big grant, conduct a genome-wide study, or doing something that, you are handed a funding for something. You can start by formulating a research question. Something as simple as that can be you choosing to lead. Thank you very much for that perspective. I'll just like to tell members of the audience that we will be taking questions during the last 15 minutes. So you can note your questions now for the panelists and they'll be happy to answer your questions. So I'm going back to Dr. Adeyemi now. When we talk about leadership gap, I am somewhat biased towards we always have a funding problem in Africa, and that might be driving some other things. But I'd like to hear your thoughts. Do you think our problem with leadership in genomics is a talent problem, an infrastructure problem, government will or policies problem, or is it funding again, or is it perhaps an interplay of all of them?
Thank you, Dr. Dada. I would say it is all four of them, but fundamentally, it is a power gap. Africa has enormous scientific talent, there's no doubt about that. The problem is that talent does not automatically translate into leadership if researchers don't have access to sustained funding. So infrastructure, high performance computing, genomic platform, mentorship, institutional support, and decision making spaces. These are all critical, important things. So, and there is an important distinction for me between capacity and power. So we can train, for instance, a scientist to analyze genomic data. But if that scientist does not really have the funding to lead a project, does not control the research agenda, if that scientist does not have access to the data and does not sit at the decision making table, then we have just built technical capacity without necessarily building scientific leadership. So I see it as a circle, actually. So limited funding will lead to limited infrastructure, limited opportunities for African-led research. It will also yield fewer opportunities to break track record and continue dependence on external funding and leadership. So breaking that circle requires more than training programs. We need to transfer decision-making power alongside technical capacity. So Africa does not lack brilliant scientists. We need to create an ecosystem in which brilliant African scientists can actually lead, they build, they retain talent, and also scale ideas. So that is what's going to be, so my response to that. The power gap is the major thing, but the four of them are interconnected. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I do agree with you that we do have the talents. In fact, judging by even the presentations of the CGI fellows today, I can say that we do have talent. And so, Dr. Nyambawari, we're coming from the perspective of we have the talent. We just want to know how best to harness it. So I'd like to ask you if you think it possible or you've seen it happen where that talent, we can harness our talent without necessarily waiting for institutions or government to lead. Do we always have to wait, or can we do things on our own in terms of leadership and genomics? Does it always have to have, oh, we're waiting for government funding or trying to get institutional funding? Can we do things as young scientists in the field of genomics? And if you've seen that play out before, would also be happy to hear your experience, Ma.
Yes, I definitely agree that we do have talent, and we should not wait for governments and institutes to support us. What I believe is that we should continue demanding stronger institutes, and we should continue demanding stronger government support, because when you get government support, that's when true sustainability, really kicks in. So I think that we should not wait. We should not suspend our science, but we should say, look, we've got a common problem, identify a group that have got a common problem, and what can we build together with what we already have. So I feel that we do not have a talent problem. Capacity building, there are many capacity building efforts being conducted. This one is a very clear, good example of capacity building. I feel for me at the moment to really harness the talent that we have a capacity connection problem, because there's a lot of capacity building, but how do we connect that capacity so that we address problems together? So it's connections within Africa and those in diaspora. So if the connections that are built through training could be sustained through these communities of practice, which don't rely on funding to exist, because funding can bring people into a room, a grant can create a consortium, but funding alone does not create a community, because community is what is longer lasting. So I feel that one needs to build strong community and collaborations that survive past funding, that can also be built without support from government or from institutes, but always advocate for that support to be built. So so definitely the talent is there, and to harness it, I think that's something that we really need to work on.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nyambawari. And particularly because of your background, I do agree with building a community. You've worked with the GGNet, the Sickle in Africa Consortium, MGen Africa, and you've worked with Pan-African collaborations, so it's cross-country collaborations. What do you think helps sustain those kind of collaborations? Because we've had similar initiatives also, which eventually fall apart down the line. And I believe it's more than just starting these communities, about making them sustainable so that we can see true growth over the years. Like Professor Fatima mentioned, we cannot perhaps see so much change within a year or two. If it falls apart within the first year or second year, we probably may not be able to achieve a lot. So what exactly, in your experience in working in all these cross-country collaborations, what do you think makes the difference between collaborations or cross-country initiatives that last and those that eventually fall apart?
Yes, thank you. So I think cross-consortia or cross-country collaborations are truly valuable. I was at the initial meeting in 2009 in Cameroon, where the H3 Africa white paper was being developed. And one thing that stood out for me, during this planning of the H3 Africa Consortium, which is one of the biggest consortiums that has really contributed to genomics on the African continent, was the genuine shared purpose that everyone genuinely wanted to see genomics thrive on the continent, and the trust that was between the researchers that were writing this paper And I think some of the elements were also the clear value for the different partners. If the value for each partner is not clearly outlined and is not really transparent through the leadership, if the leadership is not transparent, I think that can kill a consortium. And I think other things that are really I've noticed is regular interactions, even if these are just social interactions. Um, Even if there's no immediate deliverable, you meet just to discuss a paper. I had your consortium was meeting initially for Journal Club, which is fantastic. That was really building those relationships. And I think authentic relationships, right? You want people you can trust, people who are ethical, who you won't share an idea with, and the next day it has been published. And I think another aspect that has really worked well in some of the collaborations and consortia I've worked with or facilitated was the aspect of rotating leadership, so that at least leadership changes after a few years. And I think another aspect has been a sense of feeling of ownership. When people feel like they own and they're contributing, their contributions are valued, it's great for keeping a community together. If one institute or one group owns the idea, controls the money, controls the data, controls everything, everyone just feels like a subcontractor, and that doesn't become sustainable. And I guess another key thing for me is that when collaborations quietly fall apart is when the funding ends, when communication stops, and when very few people benefit from an opportunity. And another key thing is when people cannot see clear pathways for their growth. So if you are choosing a particular consortium, a particular group, if you can't see how people are growing in that group, or if you see the leader is the only one who's only talking, or then that's a reason to not join that, or at least to join knowing exactly what you need and you look for your growth elsewhere. So if there are no clear pathways for growth, I think um, that also really kills a consortium. So I think to really build a project or a consortium, you need to build a community with strong, authentic, ethical, genuine relationships. A project has a start and an end date, but a community has relationships that survive the project, where we continue meeting even when the funding and any external support is no longer there. So I believe really investing in relationship is actually a scientific infrastructure that we should invest in, to have these trusted, ethical, authentic people that you can work and collaborate with anytime that a grant arises, anytime a new idea comes up. I think those are the reflections from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nimbawari. There's a lot to unpack from what you've said. Having that sense of ownership contributes to people being willing to go the extra mile. And you also spoke about transparency, which seems to be a recurring theme in organizations or consortia that eventually do not go on to be long lasting because there is no transparency. And yes, I really like the suggestion of rotating leadership, letting people, it also helps with people learning and also gives them a pathway for growth. So, you can eventually get to this point where you're also the one leading people and making those decisions. Thank you so much, Dr. Nyambawari, for those perspectives. So I'm coming back to Dr. Adeyemi now. You have been in the training space. You are training future generation, next generation bioinformatician, and you're helping to build that capacity across the continent. And so I'm just wondering, do you think there is a place for the training we have contributing to our leadership problem? Do we have people being trained for something different? So is there a gap between the training they are offered and then the jobs, the infrastructure available when they move on from the training phase, when they're trying to, get into actual genomics work from training? Is there a difference? Is there a gap? And in addition to that, you have worked in multiple countries, and so you've had different perspectives. Are there things you've noticed that are done differently, depending on the kind of background, still on their training, the training they have had as the researchers? Is there something you think we can learn from as African scientists?
Thank you, Dr. Dada. Of course, I'll make this very short. Absolutely, there is a gap. We are getting better at training bioinformaticians, but training people without creating opportunities for them to apply those skills create another problem, which is the brain drain. And I'm glad that Professor Fatumo in his address was actually describing what the brain drain actually means, right? So we need to move from simply asking how many people have we trained, or to asking how many can build careers and lead projects within Africa. So that is the question that we should be asking. So that requires the jobs, computing infrastructure itself, research funding, mentorship, and industry opportunities. So capacity building must therefore be accompanied by capacity retention and capacity utilization. So that is what I'm going to say. That gap is there, but that's how we can actually undo it. Now, talking about moving between systems, I've been opportune to, of course, just like Prof. Fatumo said, I did my degree, my first degree in Nigeria, right? Studied in Nigeria before moving to South Africa, where I spent many years doing majorly all my postgraduate studies. And now I live in the States. Now, where I do my research, I'm, of course, still in Africa. So in this different climate, one clear difference that I have actually observed is access to resources and decision-making power. That is one clear difference between these different clients. In Africa and elsewhere, of course in America, the scientific talent exists across all these three environments, but the ability to convert that talent into leadership depends heavily on funding, infrastructure, institutional systems, and access to networks. So, for instance, in the US, researchers generally operate within much more matured funding and infrastructure ecosystems. But for instance, in Nigeria and South Africa, there is tremendous scientific talent and innovation, but researchers often have to work harder to overcome resource and structural constraints. Of course, that is shifting a bit now, just like we had earlier on, because now we are coming to the table. So for me, leadership isn't about where the scientist is located. It is about who has the resources and authority to define the question, control the research process, and translate the findings. A very good example is what Professor Fatumo is doing and what he shared with us. So that is very clinical, and that is what I think it is the way forward to define the kind of leadership that we should be playing at this critical point as African scientists. We must take the lead.
Thank you very much, sir, for those insights. There is so much to learn from the conversations we've had so far. Thank you, Dr. Nimbawari. Thank you, Dr. Adeyemi. Before I go on to ask Dr. Adeyemi my next question, I'd like to tell members of the audience that you can start sending in your questions. You can either raise your hand, so I would call on you, or you send your questions on the chat box, and then I will read it out. So Dr. Adeyemi, you talked about, okay, we're creating new scientists, we're training them, but there aren't enough opportunities. And I know that one of the things, endpoints for me in terms of genomics. One thing I'm really passionate about is precision medicine integration in Nigeria, in Africa. And it looks like, of course, for us to get to that point, we need to invest in our capacity, both infrastructure-wise and people-wise. Do you think that we are actively building that capacity to make it a not very distant dream? Or are there things that we're not yet doing enough of that we should be doing if we want to make that a reality? So Dr. Adeyemi, please.
Well, I will say that the biggest breakdown that we have is translation between data generation, of course, between data generation and translation itself. So Africa is increasingly generating valuable genomic and molecular data, but we often lack the funding, the infrastructure, the industry partnership, and regulatory pathways that we need to turn these discoveries into diagnostic, of course, to drugs and to precision therapies. So where it works better, than people assume, is not just talent and scientific innovation. So we have excellent research scientists in Africa that can generate and analyze all this data and interpret this complex data. So the challenge is creating an ecosystem, that allows them to take that knowledge all the way from discovery into product development. So if I would say, as it stands currently, it seems as if we are actually not really engaging the opportunities that we have fully, but we must not just be depending on importing, all this, importing too much of this therapeutics or all these kind of things that are available, but rather we should be doing both. We should be actually building important capacity in genomics. We should continue. We are making progress, bioinformatics, pharmacogenomics, and molecular medicine. But there still remain a gap that we need to fill in between generating this local knowledge and developing locally relevant products for the knowledge. So my concern is that Africa could become very good at generating genomic data while continuing to purchase the diagnostics and therapeutic developed elsewhere. So the real goal should be then to move from this data generated in Africa to discoveries developed in Africa for African population and African expertise. So this is where precision medicine becomes not just something that something applied to Africa, but to become something that is developed by Africa and actually for Africa and from Africa to the entire world.
Thank you so much, Dr. Adeyemi. Really insightful. I'm learning a lot about what we can do, even despite our limited resources, despite the lack of infrastructure. We cannot just fold our hands and, wait. But of course, it requires a lot of will. We need to be very passionate, interested in building our capacity as a continent. Another reminder to members of the audience, you can start sending your questions and you can raise your hand as well. So while we wait for any questions from the audience, Dr. Nimbawari, I am more interested in, you have essentially worked on basically translating genomics work for people that are not in genomics. So MGen Africa, your educational work, you've tried to train or translate genomics for people outside the lab, from patients to communities. And I want to know, what do you think is the role of public genomic literacy in leadership? So Gladys even mentioned as the founder that it took a while for her to find a community, or she had to even think, oh, she didn't know there were other people who had interests like her, because it's not commonplace, even amongst healthcare workers, even those amongst scientists. Some people, when you say genomics, they're like, what are you talking about? So do you think there is a role for public genomic literacy? Is that something we should work towards? And how does it relate to the discussion we're having today on leadership gap?
Yeah. So thank you so much. I see genomic literacy as part of leadership or scientific leadership not as something separate from it. If genomics remains understandable only to genomic scientists, then we've not yet built a genomic future for Africa. So for me, public engagement is not an outreach activity that happens after the science is finished, right? It is part of the research cycle. It builds understanding, trust. You can even increase participation in your research. And ultimately, the environment in which African genomics can succeed is really through bringing people along with the science. So if genomics is going to influence healthcare in Africa, scientists should be able to explain what they are doing, why it matters, what its limitations are, and what it could mean for individual families, for communities. So we should not just focus on producing excellent science and publishing papers that are just in libraries. It really means bringing people along with the science, the communities, the healthcare professionals, and the policymakers. It's really about an issue of trust as well, because genomics, is touches on ancestry, it touches on identity, on disease risk, on family relationships or paternity issues. Those are really sensitive issues. If we do not communicate clearly and transparently and consistently, we can create a little vacuum for ourselves as researchers that can be really easily filled with misunderstanding and mistrust from the community's policies, and it will be difficult actually to translate your own work into policy or to get people to sign up for your research projects. And I think literacy is also about future of our field. We cannot build the next generation of African genomic scientists if young scientists cannot see or understand themselves within a genomics framework. So with the MGen Africa project, the point was really, the point is to make genomics accessible to high school learners. And I see young people are just more likely to imagine a future in which a future in this field when genomics is explained in ways that connect with their health, with their families, and the challenges facing their communities. And we also talk about precision health or precision medicine. Who is going to implement is the healthcare workers. And if we now just give them the genomics to implement before we engage with them and raise their literacy levels, and I think it even goes beyond literacy, it's raise their competence levels to digest genomic data, then I think we are shooting ourselves in the foot. So all our work that we do, we should be able to translate it for the different stakeholders or communities that we work with, and translate it in a way that is applicable to their levels of understanding and to how they will use the data later. So yeah, and I think it's really fulfilling work when you do public engagement activities while you are also doing your research. You can also even learn a lot about your own research from lay people or from the communities that are going to be consumers of our research outputs or outcomes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Onyembawari, for that insight. I do agree with us having to do a lot of work in terms of talking, engaging the community, engaging even the policymakers who we think should do more policies that will help our growth as scientists. Scientific communication, being able to not just talk about it in terms of DNAs and RNAs and sequencing, being able to communicate our findings and what they mean in clear terms for even healthcare workers to be able to understand. Thank you so much, Dr. Nimbawari. There's a question in the chat from Gladys Ibrahim, and I think I'll direct it to Dr. Adeyemi. Which practical, still emerging areas of learning and capacity building should young people focus on, ones that are essential to a thriving genomics ecosystem but remain underdeveloped in Africa? Dr. Adeyemi, please help answer her question.
Okay, so if the goal is to build a thriving African genomics ecosystem, not simply to produce more people who can just run sequence or bioinformatician courses, um, young people should increasingly develop skills that at the interface between genomics, data, healthcare, policy, entrepreneurship, and implementation. So recent analysis has actually shown, just like we have also followed from the presentation this morning by Professor Lombard and Fatumo, that Africa has expanded sequencing capacity very considerably. But bioinformatics expertise, sustainable career pathways, data infrastructure, genomic medicine, and translation, these still remain the major bottlenecks. So I would say that there are key high priority areas that are emerging that I think young Africans should actually be exploring or be preparing themselves towards. Number one is, now we're in the era of AI, artificial intelligence. I would say artificial intelligence and genomics. And young people can learn machine learning, deep learning, the LLMS, the variant interpretation, just like we saw in the presentation this morning. A lot of novel variants already available, right from African data. So AI for omics data, for instance, multi-omics data, predictive modeling, these are the various skill that young people need to be learning. And why does this matter? Genomic data sets are growing very fast, right? Very faster than even the workforce that we currently have to interpret them. Another area is the genomic data engineering, something like cloud computing, for instance, HPC, maybe workflow annotation, those are the kind of thing, APIs, databases, those are the kind of skill that young people should be looking at. Multiomic and system biology is another aspect in terms of combining genomics from transcriptomics, epigenomics, proteomics, and metabolomics. Prof. Fatumo this morning presented a work in that regard. So we have genomic epidemiology, clinical genomics, and precision medicine. For example, variant interpretation is a skill that we should learn. Pharmacogenomics, cancer genomics, genomic counseling, principles. What are the principles of genomic counseling? Clinical reporting. So these are all the soft skills that Africa needs to move from genomic research to genomics that actually inform patient care. So genomic data governance and ethics. When one of the capstone project group was presenting, I so much love the presentation about even the involvement of governance and ethics. So data sovereignty, consent privacy, responsible data sharing. These are all these various aspects that I think young people should be looking at. And maybe let me talk about the matter of maybe biobanking. For instance, how do we design biobank? Sample management. What about metadata analysis, qualitative system, quality systems, and then long storage and ethical access. So these are all the various aspects, quite a number of them that I believe that we should actually prioritize when we are talking about shifting the narrative for mere only having people that have knowledge of how to run a sequence, how to run sequence analysis, and of course different bioinformatic courses, to people who are actually develop skills. So these are the soft skills. And of course, I think Prof. Lombard and Prof. Fatumo really emphasize developing soft skill, in terms of communication and, grant writing and all those stuff. So I think these are different skills that I think is very important that young Africans should actually be learning.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adeyemi. I hope that for those of us who are still not sure what field you want to go into in genomics, Dr. Adeyemi has given you like almost 30 different possible pathways or skills you could gain if you are still unsure. I hope you jotted down because there is so many opportunities, so many pathways in the field of genomics. We have less than 2 minutes, so we'll be taking closing remarks from both our speakers. And in your closing remark, I'd like to, hear your thoughts on what is one thing you think young scientists can do differently going forward to help improve our genomics capacity in Africa. So I'll be starting with Dr. Nyembaware. Would like to do that in about 30 seconds or less.
Great. Thank you so much. So I think for me, a closing thing is when you go for training, don't only go for the techniques. Also learn other skills that are needed for you to develop as a leader and give yourself permission to lead. No matter how small the leadership role is, just give yourself permission to lead an idea, lead a collaboration, and don't wait for anyone to give you that permission. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nyembaware. Dr. Adeyemi, please.
For me, now is the time to arise and act. Be willing, and where there is a will, there's always a way. Just have the willingness and launch out, act. We are not too young to lead. Now is the time to arise. The data Professor Fatumo showed us say that by 2050, we are going to have almost about 60 to 70% of African population. They are just young. So we are the future. Let's rise and let's act. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Adeyemi and Dr. Nyembaware. Thank you so much for your contributions. It's been a really insightful discussion. And I hope that we've all learned one thing or two as young African scientists. We're the future. And we do not need to wait for, the big grant, a $30,000 US grant to start leading. You can start leading even in terms of coming up with a research question, even in your capstone project group, if you're in the CGI fellowship, and do not just go out looking for, technical training, also be interested in how these things come about. Thank you very much, everyone. It has been a pleasure hosting this session, and we've now come to the end of it. I'll be handing over back to Anavami. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Rachel Dada, and thank you very much to Dr. Samson Adeyemi and Dr. Victoria. We have come to the end of today's events. This is the Consortium of Genomic Students and Young Researchers in Africa. And on behalf of the organization, I would like to sincerely thank everyone who has been part of this journey and who made these events a success. Thank you for all the insights and the wisdoms that you have shared throughout the course of these discussions that we've had today. I think that this event has exposed not only how far CoGSAYR has come and the work and innovation that has been put in by its leadership and partners, but also the work that lies ahead. And to quote Professor Fatima, in genomics today, the biggest gap is also the biggest opportunity. Africa has the deepest genomic diversity and the fastest growing health burden, yet it is the most understudied. And this imbalance is the challenge we should all aim to solve first. And I hope that has stuck with everyone else on this call as much as it has stuck with me. So we are building a community of young researchers, scientists, and leaders who will contribute meaningfully to the future of genomics and scientific research in the years to come. To our speakers, mentors, partners, fellows, and every member of the CoGSAYR community, thank you for being here and thank you for your contributions to the vision. We are excited about what the future holds and to achieving even much greater things together. It was nice having you all here. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend.